like to call to order the board meeting for the Santa Barbara School Districts for Tuesday, August 8th, 2006. I apologize for our delay. We had several family issues from our student and families that ran a little bit over time, longer than we had anticipated. So I apologize for keeping you all waiting, and we will begin immediately with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Sorry. I believe that we have a translator tonight. Our translator, I believe, is Ms. Vivian Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to come forward and introduce yourself? Ms. Rodriguez is a professional interpreter and translator, and so we'd certainly like to welcome her tonight.
Yes, thank you. My name is Vivian, and I am an interpreter. I'm a legal interpreter. I've been an interpreter for many years. And de parte de la Junta Directiva, si hay alguien que hable español y necesite de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano, me dejan saber para darle un audífono. Gracias.
Gracias a usted. I would also then like to remind those at the meeting that we also have assisted hearing technology for anybody who might need a headset that would help with any kind of hearing difficulties. Just to let us know, and we will provide those. Announcement from closed session today. We did not take any reportable action in our closed session, so we have nothing to report out. So that brings us to acceptance of donations.
And board members will see a revised sheet in front of them that revises the total for donations. A donation of $18,500 was not included on this list, which brings the total down to a corrected total of $77,318.
Move to approve with gratitude.
Second.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm a little confused. We are adding or subtracting 18,500?
There was an item for $18,500 that did not make it onto this list, but it did make it into the total.
Oh,
So
okay.
without that item.
That's why the total is,
Yes.
okay, it's going down instead.
Good, thanks for the
Okay, thank you.
clarification.
Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded to approve with gratitude. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? I'm sorry, any nays? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. We do have one absence tonight that I should point out. Ms. Harder is absent tonight for family reasons?
Yes.
For family reasons. Okay, that brings us then to introductions, proclamations, presentations, and recognitions. Dr. Sarvis will make the presentations.
Well, I am pleased to make one presentation to you tonight. Is this on, Chris? Good. And that is to present to the board Amy Alzina, who is the principal for Community Academy. Amy, please come forward. Community Academy grades kindergarten through third grade. The camera side, please. Let me tell you about Amy. That's any side is your best side, honey. Former teacher Amy Alzina is serving as a 60%, a one-year interim position principal for grades K through 3 for the Santa Barbara Community Academy. She replaces Principal Joan Jameson, who retired in June. Amy earned a bachelor's degree in liberal studies from Westmont College and a master's in education administration from Azusa Pacific University. In July 1999, now Amy's been on tour of duty here with us, as you'll hear, she joined the academy as a K-4 PE teacher and after-school coordinator. Then in 2001, she began to work as a 5th grade teacher, followed by 3 years as a kindergarten teacher, then last year as a 1st grade teacher. So we like that kind of experience. During that period, she spent 2 years as an administrative intern for the district. She is enthusiastic, as you can see, and volunteers her boundless energy for the school, where she's implemented and taught aerobics, wellness classes for parents, organized carnival-type games for the school's annual family picnic, and coordinated an annual fundraiser for the needy families at the academy. She's also a community volunteer and has worked with Heal the Ocean. I present to you Amy Alzina.
Wow. Thank you for the appointment. We are just off to a great start at the academy right now with our highest enrollment ever at 325 students. I have a fabulous team of teachers, and it's just going to be a great year. So please come into our open doors. I look forward to seeing you all at our campus soon. So thank you again.
Thank you, and we welcome you to your new position. Thank you, Ms. Alzina. Okay. Dr. Sarvis?
Well, we do have a superintendent's report tonight. There are a number of items I'd like to tell the board about. There's an important report coming from the Department of Education at the end of this month. On August 31st, the California Department of Education will publicly release the 2005-06 APR, the Academic Performance Report, which includes the API, Academic Performance Index, the AYP, this is, yeah, I know the board members have all this down, Adequate Yearly Progress, and PI, Program Improvement Report. So all three of those are coming to us in just a couple of weeks. The API Growth Report indicates whether each school has met its school-wide and subgroup API growth targets. The AYP report, which is the one that's linked to No Child Left Behind, includes all the elements used to determine the adequate yearly progress for a school year or the location or the local education agency. And the Program Improvement Report provides school and local education agency program improvement status. So we're looking forward to those reports, and we will give you an update on those as soon as we get information. Also, the new school year is right around the corner. We have 5 staff trainings in August. The first is a medical administrative activities training, which is next Tuesday on August 15th. The next is a management retreat, which will be on August 16th. Board, please join us at 8:30 at the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion. The third is breakthrough training, which is for administrators to free up time so that they can do what they need to do, be in classrooms. That will be on August 17th and 18th. Next, our elementary district-wide staff in service will feature Susanna Dutro, and that will be on August 22nd. Board members, by the way, have this list, and I believe there's a list on the side as well. And finally, our secondary district-wide staff in service with Dr. Tim Canald will be on August 24th. All of those will be of interest to the board, and the county has set up a board meeting evening with Dr. Canald, and I believe most of the board members will be going there with me. Our 2 year-round schools started the year on July 11th. I'm pleased to announce that Cleveland's enrollment is now up to 379 students, and Santa Barbara Community Academy total enrollment is now up to 323 students. Also, the comprehensive 9000 series board bylaws that we spent so much time on have been processed and are now on the district's website. Update on Board of Education candidates. Friday is the deadline for incumbents to file their declaration of candidacy for the November election. If an incumbent does not file, non-incumbents have until August 16th to file. To date, 1 incumbent and one non-incumbent have filed a declaration of candidacy. 3 non-incumbents have picked up papers from the elections office, but as of yesterday have not yet filed the declaration. I have some good news and some sad news to report. Good news, Dan and Kelly Choi, teachers at Dos Pueblos High School, welcomed daughter Sophie on July 1st. And San Marcos High School Assistant Principal Jennifer Foster has a new daughter, Emma Sandra Foster, born July 27th. We're proud of these people for keeping our schools full of children. But we do have sad news to report. On July 4th, La Colina Junior High School graduate Alyssa Smelly died of an inoperable tumor during the past year as she faced the toughest challenge of her life. She never missed a day at La Colina School. Alyssa was the valedictorian at the school. She was a performing arts star, a talented athlete. She ran track and cross country, and she was a stellar student. La Colina plans to name a performing arts award after her. And Jim Reynolds, longtime math teacher at Santa Barbara Junior High, died on July 8th. Jim has been with us since 1993, and he was a beloved educator who shared his enthusiasm for learning with his students. He will be missed. A memorial service will be held on August 22nd, August 22, at 3 p.m. at the school. Condolence letters have been sent to the families. The district's 140th anniversary celebration, has been broadcast repeatedly this summer on Channel 21, and it's still being aired. You may be able to pick it up most weeks on Channel 21. The schedule can be found on CMAC TV, CMAC.TV. We also have a great crew of Santa Barbara High School video production students who are creating a DVD on accessing education in the districts. How does a school district run? The DVD will be in English and in Spanish. The students interviewed Board President Cordero, several staff and administrators, and shot footage of 2 families reading to have some quality family time at the dinner table. The teachers are editing all the footage now, and later this week, district staff will preview their first cut. Once the final edit has been done, we will invite the students to a board meeting. And finally, tonight is Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, Mary Stark's last board meeting. We wish her well in her career as she moves to Lucia Mar. Would you like to put your crown on now? This was compliments of her staff today.
My staff crowned me today at a reception. I told them I'd put this on at least for a moment at the board meeting. I am moving to Lucia Mar School District, which is on the Central Coast in Arroyo Grande, right near San Luis Obispo. You may be familiar with it. It is where I live. So I've been commuting here every weekend and living during the week at a private home for 3 years, and it's been quite a challenge and a wonderful opportunity for my career. I will be working for Dr. Deborah Flores. You may recall she was the previous superintendent. So we will be a team once again. And I'd like to thank this board for all the support they've given me in the past and for all the challenges that took on every single area of education I'd had to this point, and I think that we have brought the district to a successful point. So thank you very much.
And that concludes our superintendent's report tonight.
Yes. Well, Mary has been more than just the queen of numbers for us. She's also been the queen of hearts for us because we have all loved her and respected the work that she has done for us. And I was not on the board before you. I think I was not on the board before you came, or I was here only a few months before you came. So I don't have the firsthand knowledge of how things were before you came, but I can say that I heard a lot of comments about how great they have been since you have been here. And I certainly want to extend my appreciation for everything you have done for our district in general and specifically for the board, because you have certainly managed to keep us abreast of the information that we desperately needed to have. And you've always done it with your charming smile and her gracious stash of chocolate. So, our meetings will be less sweet in more ways than one without you.
I have Godiva for tonight.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we have all expressed, I think, our individual best wishes to Mary at a reception this afternoon. And I think individually people have spoken to you. But publicly, I just wanted to reiterate our best wishes for your future. And we certainly will look forward to seeing you often. Thank you. Okay. Does that conclude your report? Dr. Sarvis, yes? Okay. That brings us on then to board correspondence. Is there any correspondence that board members would like to bring forward? Hearing none, we move on then to public comments. And I would like to point out that at this time the board will acknowledge requests to speak on any topic that is not on the agenda tonight, but is within the jurisdiction subject matter of the board. Any person who wishes to speak at this time is requested to fill out a speaker slip, and I believe we have a number so far. No, none. Oh, sorry, none for this item. If anybody does wish to speak to this item, this would be the time to come forward. If you are here to speak on an item that is on the agenda, however, we will be taking public comment at the time of the item on the agenda. Okay? Well, hearing no public comment, this may be a first for us. Hearing no public comment, we will move on to the consent agenda then. Okay, consent agenda. We have the approval of the minutes. Do I hear? Oh, I'm sorry. No, we have the consent agenda. I'm going through each one individually. Are there any items that board members would like to pull off the consent agenda? Ms. Rodriguez?
Before you pull items, let me just note that item D10 is being withdrawn. It will be brought back to the next meeting as it does not have the amount specified in the contract. I know it's shown on the agenda title, but
Okay.
it's not specified in the contract.
Thank you.
And there is a revision that you'll find on your desk for item D11 for one of the positions, the salary and benefit amount.
Okay. Are there any, Ms. Rodriguez, did you have other items you wanted to pull?
I'd like to pull D21 for some clarification.
Okay.
D9, D11.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, was that the only one you wanted to pull?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Noel?
9, 11, 13, and 16, please.
9, 11, 13, and 16. Okay. Ms. Melkoff, did you have any? No, and mine were covered in these, so that's good. I think that's,
Move
Do we
to
have-
approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
Second.
okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries 4-0, with one absence. And we will, those items, just for clarification, those items that we have pulled off the consent agenda, we will return to at the end of the agenda. We will vote on those, but we'll return to them at the end of the agenda. So that brings us to our action agenda. The student expulsion cases 05-06-71, 05/06-82, 05/06-93, 05/06-95, 05/06-96, and 05/06-99. Did we?
We have a numbering problem again.
We do have a numbering problem, but I think it's
on our schedule.
on our schedule. Yes. Let me just double check. I apologize to the audience. We have to double check that the numbers that we have on our agenda are accurate. The numbers we have in our packet may not be.
9-9.
Okay, so this is, okay, so the one that on our, if everyone could look at this sheet here. Okay, the one that we have that reads 05/06-99. Right, the next to the last one, the 6:20 p.m. one, should be -96. And I think the others are accurate. We do have a 9-9. It was it was the first one that was listed on our, so I think the others are correct.
So the action agenda items are correct, and they match the
Yes.
actual discussion. They
Yes.
simply do not match
The number that was on our cover
organizational
sheet. Yes.
Good.
So I think we can go ahead and still,
Okay.
Mr.
vote on
Zettel
these,
will
is that-
follow up with that.
correct, okay.
Can I go forward with a,
Yes.
okay. In the case 0506-99, move to uphold the findings and hearing, recommendations of the hearing panel with the following exception, that the student would be allowed to return to the high school of their choice in January, at the start of second semester in '07, and that the parents would work with Mr. Gonzalez on a appropriate educational program.
Do we have that?
Got it.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstention is 1. I will abstain. I was not part of this discussion. Okay.
And one absent.
So the vote, I'm sorry, so the vote is, the motion carries 3-0 with 1 abstention
And one
and
absent.
1 absence.
In
Okay.
the case of 0506-95, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4-0 with 1 absence.
In the case 0506-82, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
In the case of 0506-93, move to approve the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Oh. Okay. Dr. Noel, did you second that?
I did.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
While I'm on a roll.
Yes, you are.
In the case of 0506-96, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? No. We have motion carries 3-1.
In the case 0506-71, move to uphold the findings and recommendations of the hearing panel.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. Okay. That brings us to our conference agenda. And Mr. Gonzalez, you will notify the families of these results. Thank you. Item F1 on our conference agenda, which I believe is probably what many people are here to hear about tonight, is the presentation of the draft report on feasibility analysis for Hidden Valley and the Tatum sites. I would like at this moment to, at this time, to ask anyone who is interested in speaking to this item to submit a speaker slip, and then we will invite our Dr. Sarvis will introduce
Sure.
Mr. Hetyunk, I think. who-
Well, actually, we have with us tonight Peter Smirniotopoulos
Okay.
from Unidev LLC to make the presentation to the board. I'd like to say up front, before the presentation is made, that the board will not be voting on anything tonight. The board will not be making any decisions. There will be a number of subsequent board meetings where the board will discuss these issues. So it'll be coming back in the future. This all started a number of years ago as the board appointed a real property advisory committee to advise the school district about what could be done with the properties, specifically the Hidden Valley and Tatum properties, that could bring income to the district. As the board knows, and I'm sure many of the public are aware, budgets are tight, especially in the elementary district. We have two properties, 12.5 acres at Hidden Valley and 22, almost 23 acres in Tatum. And Mr. Smirniotopoulos will further identify where those are located. The board went through a process of considering the best possible ways to investigate and explore those possibilities. The board also, at the time, was interested in the possibility of providing workforce housing to the employees of the school district. Now, this is a feasibility study. It was initiated because of the lack of funds to the district, and the question was, what could those properties do for the district to bring funds to the district? At the time that the board appointed UNIDEV to conduct a feasibility study and to look at the various options, the board also asked UNIDEV to consider the option of workforce housing. So, in fact, I'll let Mr. Smirniotopoulos describe the options and describe the information they have for us. The board has the exhibit marked F1, which is on the side table, and if we run out of those, we'll make more copies. Just, okay. Just let Mr. Hetjunk know, and we'll make enough copies so that everyone has a copy. In addition to the report, there are hundreds of pages of attachments. Those are available on DVD. And if you would like a copy of the DVD, we will make those available to you as well.
And Dr. Sarvis, if anyone does not have access to DVD technology, can they access a hard copy of that
We
information?
can get that printed, yes.
Okay.
Madam President, I have a point of information.
Yes?
It would help me to hear from council what the rules are. I'm foggy on them about the making available to the meeting, to the public, any document that is made available to the board at a board meeting. I'm a little confused by this table on the front of this report. I don't know whether, does everyone have a copy of the whole report?
They have what we have.
They have what we have?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone has
So,
the
all right,
same.
that was my question.
The
Yes.
same information the board has.
Okay. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
And Dr. Sarvis, could you clarify or mention that we've all received this just today?
Yes, I was going to speak to that actually, that I wanted the public to be aware that the board has not seen this either. We are seeing it now as you are. So this is really an informational meeting where we are going to be getting information as well as the public is going to be getting information. I want to reiterate what Dr. Sarvis mentioned, that we will not be making any decisions. We are not in a position to make decisions tonight. And this is really the beginning of the public process for examining the report and the recommendations or options that come forward. So I sort of anticipate, certainly the public is free to speak to whatever aspect of it you would like during your 3 minutes, but I would anticipate this would be an evening where we would be asking for clarification and sort of digesting the information, and then at future meetings we will probably be discussing which options we might want to support or not. Okay. Thank you.
Right. So if I may proceed, I appreciate being invited here. Again, hopefully this isn't overkill, but really the board is really accepting delivery of the draft report. In addition to the copies that the staff made for you, we provided CDs with a PDF of the entire report. That PDF contains all the documents in here, which is essentially a 74-page report document plus 33 identified exhibits. These are, we had agreed in advance that we would make reference copies for the school district so that and we'll go through what the options are for people to be able to get access to the report. Tonight does commence the public comment period in response. This was something that we discussed with the school district when we first were brought on board in terms of what the process would be. And certainly if people feel compelled to get up and make comments tonight about what we're presenting, and we're sure that there will be some response to some of the options that are discussed here, we encourage them to also take the time to go through and read not only the entire 74 pages, but look at the substance behind that, which is all the exhibits that follow. What we really could have, and we're given the option to merely deliver the report. And I have, in some respects, I have some misgivings about coming in and summarizing for you a document that we hope that the members of the board, the staff, and the public will take the time to go through in as much detail as we spent putting it together. However, we do think that there's a benefit to coming in and meeting with you and laying out for you what it is that you're getting, hopefully to make it easier for you to go through that task of understanding what we went through and what has been almost a 12-month process at this point, and where we think things are headed. So this is what the presentation is going to cover. This presentation, by the way, then ends up being an additional exhibit that will go into the final report and also will be posted to the website as a PDF. So I'm going to talk briefly about what's the purpose of this presentation, give an overview and status of the feasibility analysis process, talk about the structure and contents of the draft report. This is in hopes that it makes it a little more user-friendly. Talk about how the public can access the draft report and how to participate in the public comment period. The public comment period, again, by way of clarification, is to comment on the draft so that we can take those comments into account as we draft the final report. It is preliminary to any kind of formal public hearing process, which in turn is preliminary to any kind of decision-making process that the board plans on going through. Address some general caveats underlying the disposition options. Go ahead and put the summary of those disposition options up. I mean, we're certainly not hiding them from anybody, and this is as good a time as any to get them up in front of the board and in front of the general public assembled here, and then talk about what the next steps are in the feasibility analysis process. So the purpose of this presentation is to put this draft report into its context, to offer what we hope is a user's guide to facilitate review and analysis of this document, to make sure that everyone understands the various means by which they can access the complete report, including all of its exhibits, to encourage broad public input during the public comment period, to present the disposition options to encourage the beginning of a dialogue about what they are and what they mean, and to make sure that next steps are clearly stated. Going back to the beginning of this process for us, certainly not the beginning of the process for this school district, which goes back, I think, another 18 to 24 months before that, we were asked to help the school district address these two goals, broad goals. One, to provide greater fiscal stability to the district by maximizing the value of these existing assets, which are currently not devoted to any kind of academic use, and to, at the same time, endeavor to improve the quality of education for all students by seeing if we could develop a workforce housing program to improve retention and recruitment of well-qualified school district employees. The feasibility analysis process asked us to evaluate 4 specific disposition options, an as-is disposition of each site, which is a sale in its current condition, including whatever the existing zoning is and the current lack of any kind of entitlements to develop, to look at what the value of each of these properties would be if fully entitled for disposition, to look at development of each site as workforce housing, and to look at the extraction of what would be presumed to be the maximum amount of value through the sale of market rate housing on each site, but to have that done through a long-term ground lease. And I'll address a little bit about what that means and why that's a condition of the market rate housing development and disposition. We recognize, however, that the board does have other disposition options. These are only the 4 that we were asked to review and analyze. One, of course, would be to develop instructional, administrative, and our support facilities on either or both of these sites. The second would be to hold the land for future use or later disposition. Just to provide a little bit of context, in the In the yellow brackets, that's the subject site for Hidden Valley. That arrow points up to Palermo. You see the Hidden Valley neighborhood up onto the left. Palermo heads up to Modoc. On the right, the red lines show Veronica Springs Road running down that side, which heads down to Las Positas. We show there then the Parks family property, and then on the other side of the Parks family property, the Hillside House property. So this piece of property is about 12 acres that is right at the very edge of an existing and long-standing residential neighborhood that is primarily single-family detached homes, primarily single-story, but there are some non-residential uses around there. And for further geographic reference, this lies near the intersection of Modoc and Las Positas Road. That's the main intersection right off of very near 101. The Tatum site, which is near San Marcos High School, hang on 1 second. There are the boundaries of the site. It sits near the shopping center. It sits with El Camino Elementary School on one side, San Marcos Grower site on another side. There's a retail center, some multifamily housing in between the subject site and Turnpike. Hollister runs parallel below the San Marcos Grower site. So hopefully that gives everyone a context not only for where these properties are, but what the surrounding uses of these sites are, because those things do impact how you would develop them and the value they would represent. In terms of the process, the contract was approved and work began in the same month, in August of 2005, so fully a year ago. All substantive tasks required to be provided or performed under the contract have been completed. We're really now just to the point where we've completed our analysis and delivered the draft report, and we do present disposition alternatives. These completed feasibility analysis tasks include overview information such as a third-party market analysis report, a demand analysis conducted by Unidev, a recommended development program that really was developed jointly between our market analyst and our firm, development of architectural styles that is limited to the development of workforce housing, because in the market rate housing context, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of what kind of housing that you would develop to extract the maximum value out of each of these two sites. Unit plan prototypes also done by Lim Cheng Rawling and Associates, which worked with Cernal Androlitis on the architectural types, and preliminary construction costs, which we received from the Tobes Group. In addition to that, land use, environmental, and site analysis of planning work has also been completed, including the review of jurisdictional land use issues, which was done jointly between Unidev and Pat Saley, who is the school district's land use consultant. Evaluation of the permitting process is done by our land use counsel, David Fainer. Environmental constraints analysis performed by Rincon Consultants. Site synopsis performed by Hewitt Zollers Civil Engineers. Schematic site plans prepared by Lim Cheng Rawling and Associates. Workforce housing preliminary development budget prepared by Unidev, and infrastructure cost estimate. These are all among the 33 exhibits that are in this draft report. These are just, I think, some of the more significant ones. In terms of the process, as mentioned, the delivery of the draft report commences this 30-day comment period. A final report will be delivered sometime after that 30-day comment period ends, but hopefully before the end of September. It really depends upon how much comment we get and how much of it is substantive and new, as opposed to comment that reinforces information we've already taken on board. It's our understanding that the school board then intends to hold public hearings on the final report, and no decisions will be made by the school board until after the entire process has been completed. So this is by no means the final opportunity for public comment, and although we have had a fairly extensive community input process from the very beginning, in many respects this begins sort of the formal process of public comment.
Madam President, are questions from the board in order now, or
Would you prefer to take the questions now, or
just little informational questions?
Sure.
That 30-day comment period, when does that begin? Tonight?
Arguably tomorrow. tomorrow's, I believe, the first
Now,
time.
are
that
we
the-
bound by that contractually? It's because it's summer and, you know, a lot of people aren't here, and we would probably have a chance of getting more reliable input from people after school begins.
Perhaps, Dr. Noel, I can address that question. When the contract was developed, it was merely envisioned that the report would be delivered. UNIDEV has agreed to the request by staff that it come twice in connection with the presentation of this report, and that in between the presentations, that there be a minimum 30-day public comment period in order to maximize the public process. So I would just offer that UNIDEV has gone out of their way to accommodate the district requests up until this point.
So this sounds like it might be an issue that we would want to discuss in terms of how we would want to handle that, and that might be a lengthy discussion. So I'll ask you to continue at this point, and we may interrupt you again with
Certainly.
questions. Thank you.
So that you understand what it is that we are delivering. As mentioned again, it's a 74-page report, which is really the analysis and distillation of these 33 exhibits that follow. The exhibits are both process exhibits and substantive exhibits, and the distinction would be, for example, among the things in the exhibits are any public presentations or formal reports we made to the board along the way through our process. A substantive exhibit would be, for example, the environmental analysis prepared by Rincon on each of the two sites. So really the report describes and analyzes the substantive exhibits. The exhibits, I believe, run close to 600 pages. So the 74 pages is in essence an analysis and distillation of that 600 pages of exhibits. And then mercifully, there's about a 14-page executive summary that's at the very beginning of the report and so that you sort of drill down. You go through that first 14 pages. It pretty much tells you what the balance of the report says. You just get into more and more detail as you go into the report, and more detail if you decide to go into the exhibits. The report is broken down into 5 major sections. I think it's also helpful to understand this structure. In addition to the executive summary, there's analysis and information of things that affect all options. For example, the issue of teacher turnover affects what you may decide to do with Tatum or Hidden Valley. It's sort of independent of land use type issues. So we decided to break that information out separately. The market analysis, because that looks at the entire housing market in Santa Barbara County and in the city, is sort of one of these overarching issues that's not dependent specifically to a site. We then go into some detail about the overview of our workforce housing approach. We do that because that is a pretty unusual real estate transaction, and we feel that it needs to be explained. We feel that in order for the board to understand the meaning of all 4 of these options, it needs to understand what it would mean to develop a workforce housing project. So we take some time to talk about a variety of issues, including how the long-term ground lease works, how the affordability is calculated, and all of those issues. We then go into specific discussions with regard to each of the 2 sites. Those discussions run the gamut from the technical analysis all the way to specifically what we recommend with regard to the site. However, we made the conscious decision not to bury what we decided to look at with regard to either of the sites in D. That actually should be D and E. I'm glad the newly appointed principal of the academy isn't here. What we did is we actually put it, I think it's on page 7 or 9, we put in a table that says here are the 4 disposition options with regard to each site, and it's also in this presentation. Accessing the draft report, the public comment period, there are at least 4 mechanisms we're aware of. One, staff prepared handouts. Hopefully there were enough handouts for people to pick up of the report itself. We brought extra copies of the CD. I think we have 9 or 10 extra copies of the CD, which has the entire PDF. So this entire document in a portable document format. All these materials can be downloaded from sbsdk12.org. So directly from the website, somebody can download the entire report. The school district has made arrangements to accept requests for additional copies of the CD to be made if somebody wants it as a PDF. The school district has also made arrangements to accept requests for a complete printed copy. I'll get clarification from Barbara. I believe it involves just the copying of the materials, does not include this
And that-
lovely binder.
Well, okay, that's included on the cover of this, by the way, in terms of cost. And we will put a copy of this in the foyer so that the public is able to come in and take a look at the full copy without going through any of that.
Can I ask a
How
couple
about a copy
questions?
in, please go ahead.
Typically, when a large document of importance to the community is produced, copies are placed in at least one or two of the local libraries, and perhaps maybe at some of our school sites. Is that something that's my first question. Can we make those available?
We could make those available.
Um,
yes.
If I may, 4 more identical binders are being delivered tomorrow. I was only willing to drag one 20-pound binder through 3 airports today to bring it here, but the remaining 4, we'd committed to deliver 5 complete printed copies of the draft report, so the school district will have 5 total.
I'd like to suggest we print some additional copies.
We'll
to-
identify other sites and
Okay.
we'll post that on our webpage so that people can find
Okay.
out where, or they can simply call the superintendent's
Great.
office and find out where they are.
And perhaps just at each high school library, so they're distributed district-wide, so that somebody that wanted to look at a library could do that, or we could put them at a public library. My other question is regarding some sort of cover letter. Is there something that explains what our process is as far as getting comments and where they can be sent, and is that, you're going to do that in your
Apologies for
presentation?
interrupting, but it's both in the executive summary and it's in the
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, thank you.
My question was exactly Mrs. Rodriguez's question. Thank you very much.
And in fact, during the 30-day public comment period, there are 2 mechanisms by which the general public can submit their comments. One is to send an email to feasibilitystudy@sbsdk12.org. The second is they want to either deliver or mail written comments. Those should be addressed to Feasibility Analysis, Facilities Department, Santa Barbara School Districts at this address. And this information is in the executive summary of the report, I think fairly on in the executive summary. Some general caveats. By the way, everything that's in this presentation is taken out of the report. There's nothing here that's sort of new. The draft report discusses a range of disposition options. There are really no recommendations that are being made in this draft report. And I think that's very important. This was the way our engagement was structured. We were not asked to make a recommendation to the board of what is the best of the 4 options. We were asked to make a recommendation of what is the best way to approach each of those 4 options so the board then could evaluate what it wanted to do with each of those alternatives. There's a classic risk-reward ratio in any investment. It certainly applies in real estate investments, and you'll see when we get to the table of the disposition options how that risk-reward ratio plays out. But it's very important, we believe, for the board to understand that the more risk-averse it is, the less value is going to be extracted from either of these 2 pieces of property, and the more risk the board is willing to assume, the more value that can be extracted out of each of these pieces of property. And that becomes very clear when we look at the difference between an as-is disposition and a fully entitled disposition, because in that second alternative, the school district would be assuming the risk that it can take either or both of these properties through an entitlement process and thereby enhance the value of those properties. Uncertainties surrounding land use approvals. Santa Barbara is certainly very well known for the level of participation of the general public and surrounding communities in land use decisions. And we have recognized that coming into this. There's been a fair amount of input in our process. That was input that we invited. And I'd have to say that by and large, other than some of the tone being a little bit uncomfortable, most of the land use issues that have been raised by community groups have been legitimate. And we have made a commitment to try to address those legitimate issues to the extent we can. it's pretty clear to us as relative outsiders to the Santa Barbara market, having come in and watched the housing element update process in Santa Barbara County shift, we thought, 180 degrees from trying to put all the housing in the South Coast to now putting most of the housing in the North Coast, that this is at best a very changeable environment for land use approvals. And when you look back up at that risk-reward ratio, that's something that the board really needs to take into consideration. Balancing monetary returns and educational quality. We think this is probably going to be the most difficult challenge the board will face in not necessarily in understanding the draft report. We think that you're going to understand the draft report upon taking the time to go through it, but really in trying to make any kind of a decision about these four different options, because three of them are arguably purely monetary. The as-is disposition option, the fully entitled disposition option, and the extracting value out of the land through market rate development on a long-term ground lease really boil down to numbers. The idea of both extracting value out of the property through a long-term ground lease that happens to be the mechanism by which you deliver workforce housing is very different from those other three options. And you may find yourselves having to balance monetary return with other benefits that may be a little less tangible, such as trying to lower your teacher turnover tenure, particularly in the first 7 years of teaching with the school district. Working cooperatively, we think that this is an enormous task for any public institution or entity to take on. And should the school district decide to proceed with any one of these four options on any one of these two sites, we think that you need to work cooperatively. I'm not quite sure why that says production cost supply. I think that may be a Freudian slip in the parenthetical. But the idea is that we think that with regard to Hidden Valley, there are a number of issues that are larger than the issue of one landowner trying to extract value out of its property, and that therefore working cooperatively with the City of Santa Barbara Planning Department, the Planning Commission, and the City Council would be prudent, and we feel the same way with regard to the Tatum site. So we think that any next steps, once a decision is made, certainly should be through some kind of a cooperative effort with each of those jurisdictions. And now to, I think the issue that really probably brings most people out to meetings of this type, and that is the benefits and burdens of residential densities. There is, I don't think it's going to be any surprise to anyone in the room, certainly anybody who understands real estate development, there are economies of scale when you get to certain densities. And the fact of the matter is that in communities like Santa Barbara throughout the country, existing residents don't like higher densities, and people who develop particularly affordable workforce housing like to get those densities higher than they are than are generally acceptable in existing communities. And there are benefits and burdens. We'll talk a little bit about that. One of the conclusions we made in doing our analysis is that we don't believe it is financially feasible for the school district to do workforce housing on either of these two sites at the existing densities. So if the school district decides that it wants to proceed with a workforce housing option, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be hopefully working with the local communities on trying to get agreement on what is an appropriate level of density. It's not going to be an easy discussion for anyone, and we say that not from our experience here, but what we see from around the country. The density, we think, has a lot of benefits that can come with it if it's done well. It also has the potential of imposing a lot of burdens, and we're not ignorant or disregarding of those concerns. All right, so here's the page that everybody really came to see. I'm going to take a drink of water while everyone reads this. What we tried to do is distill 11 and a half months of work down into two tables. And what those two tables do is, based on a set of assumptions, these assumptions, by the way, are clearly set forth in the executive summary.
This is shown on page 7, by the way.
Like I said, we didn't try to hide this in the back of the report. It's fairly upfront. What the relative values are of each property with regard to each option. The as-is disposition value, these, by the way, are net numbers. So this would be net to the school district, assuming that the school district, for example, would be permitted under California law to go through an entitlements process for a piece of property and then sell it outright and take those proceeds, which we understand it could use for other capital improvements, but not for operating expenses. So to understand
Can I ask
these...
a question about that?
Sure.
If the property is sold outright, the funds may be used only for capital?
That's our understanding.
That's California law, or, Mr. Price?
Mr. Price can address that.
And we have sorry.
Yes, if it's sold outright, it's limited to capital. If it's developed under a long-term ground lease, it can be used for general fund purposes as well as capital purposes.
If it's sold outright, even if it's to employees or affordable housing for employees?
Well, you're talking about a distinction, I think, between an outright sale and a workforce housing development on leased land. As the presenter will be demonstrating, I believe that UNIDEV's concept is that were there to be a workforce housing development, that would occur on land that was subject to a long-term ground lease from the district, the result being that the revenues that the district would receive would be able to be used for general fund purposes and not limited to capital improvements only.
Thank you.
And by the way, the long-term ground lease model is something that we didn't invent as part of this process. It's something that we created about 20 years ago at UC Irvine and have continued to apply with some modification in other parts of the country. So essentially what you have here is the difference between the fully entitled sale and the as-is sale is a reflection of that risk-reward ratio. And we, again, in the, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I also don't want to be in a position of having you think that I don't think you're going to take the time to read the report and be viewed as sort of spoon-feeding you what's in the contents of it. But fundamentally, we think that there's about a 50% risk premium or risk discount to a developer who would come in and buy the property in its current condition, particularly with regard to the Hidden Valley property, because it has some technical issues with regard to access that need to be resolved, and they impact not just the school district's property, but two other properties as well. There is a high degree of risk for somebody to coming in buying that property that they would pay an amount of money assuming that they would be able to develop X and end up after a long involved entitlements process being able to develop X minus Y. So we applied a 50% risk discount off of the fully entitled value of the property for someone who would come in and offer to buy the property in its as-is condition. We also, by the way, say in the report that we think that if this is an option that the school district wants to pursue, that after making that decision, you really ought to go through a second step, which would be some kind of probably a sealed bid process, and let the development community tell you what kind of risk premium they assess on that. But this is generally how a land developer or a builder developer would approach a piece of ground that's not in a greenfield condition where getting entitlements is fairly easy. For the fully entitled sale, what we did is we made some assumptions about what would be the best way to develop this piece of property. And because we've already acknowledged that land use approvals are very challenging, we adopted what we call the path of least resistance approach. And that is, we assumed that a developer that wanted to be able to get into this property and out of it as quickly as possible wouldn't try to go through any process of increasing the density. And in fact, we believe, based upon an analysis of surrounding land values, that you probably could get as good a return as you're going to get out of a higher density development on the Hidden Valley site by going in, developing what we calculate to be 48 single-family detached homes at the market. The city is going to require you to have a component of inclusionary. There is some disagreement, and we described this in the report, as to whether the permitted zoning is 48 or 60, depending upon whether you apply a purely mathematical analysis of the number of lots, or if you look at the lot sizes and requirements. We believe the conservative number is 48, but based upon the city's inclusionary zoning requirement and informal conversations we've had with the city, we believe you would add on top of that 48 another 8 dwelling units, which would have to be affordable. So that's why you see here this number of 56. One of the things that we also acknowledge in the report is that probably one of the greatest areas of disagreement, at least from other real estate professionals, is going to be whether the assumptions are valid or not, or whether we should be using some other set of assumptions. We acknowledge the fact that when you're doing a study of this type, you have to make certain assumptions, and they have to be reasonable. We believe these are reasonable assumptions on our part. We certainly think the 56 dwelling units is probably the lowest amount of density that a residential developer would go into because of other surrounding concerns with regard to land values. We don't think this is a situation where someone would come in and say, well, I'll just put in 5 $10 million homes. We don't think the market is there for that. We think the best land planning from a market rate developer standpoint would be to come in, try to emulate the land use pattern of the Hidden Valley neighborhood and follow the zoning to the letter. So that was one of our assumptions on doing the on all 3 of these options that involve market rate development. I'm going to jump down to the third one, or the fourth one rather, which is market rate housing project, because what we did here is we took the same assumptions that we made with regard to laying out the land, sizes of units, pricing of units, but we assumed that they would be subject to a long-term ground lease. We go into some detail in the report talking about some reservations we have about using a long-term ground lease when you're applying it to a purely market rate house, as opposed to the way we've applied the long-term ground lease as a tool to get the prices down for workforce housing. So we do apply somewhat of a risk discount there of about 25%. We think that in order to go into the marketplace and have people buy market rate homes that are subject to a long-term ground lease, that there's going to have to be a reason why they are giving up the part of the value of their property that relates to the value of the land. That 25%, by the way, is consistent with other parts of our model for evaluating the market rate disposition options. We also apply a fairly conservative escalator. This is, unfortunately, residential development. It is very difficult to do market rate residential development on a long-term ground lease. That's not to say that these numbers aren't substantial. $13 million is a potential takeaway from the completion of a 56-unit development, and $20 million over 30 years is indeed a substantial amount of money. We do think that this approach would need to be explored further to determine whether or not you go into some markets and there's so much resistance to a concept you can't sell the unit. We don't think that would be the case here, but it's possible that the 25% risk discount may end up being 40% risk discount. That would change the return. We do not, we originally sort of thought of this fourth option as the highest risk proposition for the school district. The school district would actually act as the developer. And after we looked at the various constraints on the school district's ability to dispose of its land, to use proceeds from sale versus proceeds from an operating lease, we then gravitated to this model. And this model is actually not any more, has no more risk associated with it than the as-is sale. And you would, in essence, if you decided to pursue it, you would go through the exact same approach as you would in the as-is sale. You'd have to do more negotiating in terms of what the contract documents would look like. You'd probably have to spend a little more money up front for those things, but by and large, it's the same type of an approach. For the workforce housing project, we initially...
Can I just ask a quick question? How long a lease are you talking about?
We only projected the return out for 30 years, but the idea is that it would be a 99-year ground lease, which is the same model that we use in our workforce housing. So they would forever be subject to a ground lease, and they would be forever be subject to a 3% escalator on that initial capitalized ground lease payment.
I guess I'm a little confused about this also. On this market rate housing with long-term ground lease, you say $13 million. Is that in the category of capital because you sold it, or is
No,
that a flow revenue that all this makes a difference as to what we can do with the money?
It would be money from an operating lease. You'd be allowed, as we understand the law in California, you'd be allowed to use it for operating expenses. It would not be limited to capital expenditures, because it's not a disposition of the land. It is merely a long-term ground lease. All you're doing is you're front-loading that first ground lease payment and having it somewhat emulate what a developer would do when it loads the cost of the land and the carrying charges, et cetera, into the price of a home. But it is technically a ground lease payment.
So this option would have a short-term disposition value of $13 million in augmented general funds, I'm looking to Mary, and a long term of $20 million with the existing zoning. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
Thank you.
One other assumption we made to make the analysis easier to understand is we assumed that in both Hidden Valley and Tatum that the transaction would be structured so that the inclusionary units would be a wash, that basically we'd be able to price them at what it costs to construct them, and all of the other construction-related and development-related costs could be loaded into the market rate units. That's probably the only assumption that we've made here that we feel with further analysis could change the result, but I don't think it would change it by more than probably 5 or 10% in one direction or another. And we've already gotten some comments back that our 25% allocation to land value may be a little light, and that in Santa Barbara it may be closer to 30, and therefore there's already about a 5% cushion in there for accounting for how those affordable units are delivered. And we don't calculate none of the ground lease return is calculated on the inclusionary units. So they're a wash throughout the entire transaction. So this $13 million and the $20.1 million is based upon the 48 units, which are market rate. And so the same analysis, so we might as well finish up this part of it, go down to the bottom table. The same analysis applies to Tatum. There's $11 million worth of land value in an as-is disposition, almost $20 million net in a fully entitled disposition, and $16.5 million upfront and $25.5 million over time. That's not a present valued number. In doing a market rate development, again, the same methodology. The only difference between the 90 units in the Tatum analysis and the 56 units is that the county has a different bonus density program. So here we're looking at 20 bonus density units, whereas on the city property, the Hidden Valley property, we're looking at 15%. So you go from a current zoning of 75 dwelling units. By the way, the Tatum site has a purely mathematical zoning applied to it. It doesn't have any it doesn't require you to have lot minimums or minimum lot frontages, and it's designed to encourage clustering on the site. So both of these, we would argue, in terms of the number of units, would be a by right development approach. The reason you see such a difference in the Tatum table on the workforce housing is because we're looking at almost 3 times as many units on the workforce model. And there are a couple of different reasons for doing that, not the least of which is that it does improve the revenue stream to the school district. We also recognize that this would be, from a land use standpoint, a very difficult level of development to get. But from a revenue model standpoint, it certainly would be very attractive to the school district, and more importantly, is the closest we could get to actually meeting the most conservative measurement of demand that we identified through our demand analysis. We identified that there are a minimum of 307 SBSD employee households in the marketplace who would avail themselves of this type of housing with these types of restrictions. And that's the most conservative. In a non-conservative analysis, it gets up to over 500. And there are some differences with regard to the Tatum site that we felt made it more appropriate to look at a higher level of density on that site than on the Hidden Valley site. But just again, to be perfectly upfront, that is really the reason there's such a dramatic difference in the revenue generated on that Tatum table than there is for the Hidden Valley. In many respects, the workforce housing revenue generated is the same model. We took our workforce housing long-term ground lease model and applied it to the market rate disposition, the fourth option, to come up with the numbers for that. So it is a combination of a long-term ground lease payment that attaches to the pricing of the unit when it's first sold, and then we have a mechanism for recapturing some of the revenue on resale every time a unit turns over. We assume, by the way, that the units will only turn over once every 8 years. Your current turnover rate, at least among teachers in the first 7 years, is about every 3 years. So obviously we're assuming that doing something of this nature would help teachers and other staff stay longer within the school district. But again, that's one of those assumptions that may be subject to some challenge. As I said at the beginning, we spent a little more time in terms of the narrative to talk about the workforce housing model because it is both complex and a unique way of developing housing as a tool for retention and recruitment. And we've certainly spent, I think, the most time in terms of our staff commitment in this engagement to understanding the needs and demands of your employees, both by doing direct research, combinations of focus groups, and the written surveys, as well as combing through your human resources data to look and see if we could identify any trends. Significant conclusions that came out of the survey report, I'll go through these very quickly. Your employees, by and large, want to own their own homes if they can. Monthly and upfront housing costs are significant concerns to them. Living on the South Coast is extremely desirable, I mean, as it is for everyone who lives on the South Coast. Finding a suitable, affordable residence is viewed as extremely difficult. Workforce housing being made available will positively affect retention. This was by far the highest response we got of any of the survey questions. 76% of respondents said that it would make a difference in their decision to stay as opposed to leave. Workforce housing being offered by another district may negatively affect retention. That was pretty close. That was 71%. Said that if another school district offered the same job, same salary, but with a workforce housing benefit, they would be more inclined to leave than stay. They are willing to accept trade-offs, and we explore those trade-offs in some detail. That's how we get to that 309 households, our conservative demand number. And having workforce housing is the most desirable housing benefit. That is when you look at other options such as we'll provide a $25,000 or $50,000 soft second, or we'll provide up to $5,000 in closing costs, and it's a forgivable loan. The fact of the matter is, if your household is earning $60,000 a year, the median price of a house in the South Coast is $1.3 million. A $50,000 or even $100,000 soft second is not going to bridge the gap between what you can afford and what houses are going for. Teacher turnover, and again, these are summary conclusions. There's an enormous amount of data that's provided not only in the report itself but in the exhibits. Teacher turnover in the first 7 years is very high. 50% of the teachers hired in 1997 have already left the school districts. The average time teaching of those who left was just over 3 years, so they're not in the school system for very long. The high cost of South Coast housing is negatively impacting all Santa Barbara School District's employees. And increasing employee turnover and longer commuting times for employees is hurting instructional and social continuity for students and families. It's impeding professional development for all staff, and it's eroding the high quality of education students and parents expect. We did, in response to comments, by the way, that we got at the community forums that we held in March about why is this an issue? Why is it a big deal that the teachers are turning over every 3 years? We went back in and looked at some national research on this issue. This is obviously not just a trend for Santa Barbara, although we think it's exacerbated here by the real estate prices. But nationally, there's a concern about the quality of education because teachers are not staying in the profession for the periods of time that they used to stay in the profession.
Are you saying that they are leaving because of the housing
Yes.
issue? single variable explanation of
No.
why people leave Santa Barbara? Why the teachers leave?
That is one of the primary, in the focus groups and also in the survey, that is one of the primary reasons for leaving. They can't afford to find a house that's desirable to live here, and if they want to buy something, they have to buy it in a location where over time the commute becomes unbearable. And they talk specifically about the fact, not only about the monetary impact, but the fact that it impacts their ability to interact with their students, it impacts their ability to return to school for school-related events. We got an enormous amount of comments in the focus groups in particular about the impact the housing cost is having on their decision to stay or leave.
But the reason I ask is because I have the impression, for example, I just recently visited the Garden Grove School District. Now, that's not exactly a paradise down there, but they have the same problem. And their teachers can't afford to buy there either. The only place you can afford to buy is in Temecula or beyond that near Banning. So I just don't. So I don't see that is an explanation of why people leave this district to go to another district where they're going to encounter the same thing. They tell me it's the same thing now in Camarillo almost. It's the comparative thing that.
Well, and I believe there are 3 and possibly 4 different exhibits in this draft report that go to the survey, written survey and analysis, and the focus groups that describes quantitatively what we found out through those processes. So we don't deny that this is impacting other school districts. We haven't been hired by other school districts. We were engaged by this school board to find out if there's a problem with regard to housing costs and teacher retention as part of this third option of looking at the workforce housing. And Claire, I mean, if 71% of your or 76% of your survey respondents said if another school district offered them a housing benefit, they'd be more inclined to leave than stay. I would suggest that not only do you have a problem now, you may have a burgeoning problem if any adjoining school district does indeed adopt a workforce housing program so that they have the ability to offer your existing staff the same salary and other benefits plus a housing benefit.
Do you have any data on how many Southern California districts offer a workforce housing?
To our knowledge,
benefit?
the only school district that has a workforce housing program of this kind is Santa Clara, and that was done with a private developer and isn't really sponsored by the school district, and I believe that was 40 rental units. Some of the other school districts offer the other kinds of benefits that we explored with the teachers
So
in
your
the
question
survey.
your question asking them what would you do if there was such a thing was purely hypothetical. There's only one example.
Well, I wouldn't say it's purely hypothetical.
Almost purely.
We're in discussions with 3 other school districts throughout the state of California that are interested in adopting some form of workforce housing program. So it may be theoretical to think that another school district would offer them something because there's only one school district we're aware of that has any kind of employer-related housing. But over the next 5 to 10 years, I think you're going to see other school districts that are embracing this kind of a model because it helps address a concern that the teachers have. And not Santa Barbara has probably the biggest disparity between the median price of housing and what teachers are paid. So the problem is certainly more acute here as an economic problem for teachers. This is just some employee data in terms of what teachers are paid. We have, I think, even more detailed and updated data, but and we not only looked at the data from your own personnel records, but we extrapolated data for household income, because you're always looking at household income for home ownership and affordability purposes out of the survey data, because that's information that obviously you don't collect as an employer. You don't collect information on what a spouse or significant other in a household might earn. This is just some information about weighted averages of resale prices from January 5th through February 6th. We picked this time period because, among other reasons, this is the time period during which the median price of a new single-family detached home in the South Coast exceeded $1.3 million. We have even a lot more detail in here, not only from the Robert Charles Lesser & Company market analysis, but also additional research that we did in order to develop our pricing and development model for the market rate disposition options. This is, I regret that this is so difficult to see. There's a lot of information here. The most important information is actually the information that is missing. As of March 2006, these were the number of houses that were available to households in these income ranges to buy at these prices. So basically, this marketplace is producing 0 houses that are available for probably about 85% of the school district's paid employees across the board. We then took our survey data, gave it to Robert Charles Lesser and Company, developed a program looking at specifically what are your employees paid, extrapolating into household incomes, and what kind of housing they're looking for. So when we looked at that, when we talk about the demand 307 units of housing, we're not just looking at 307 as a gross number of employees earning between $0 and $40,000 a year or $50,000 a year. We actually looked at them at income bands and broke it down. The conservative estimate, by the way, which as you can see adds up to the 307, is we took specifically into account how people responded to the survey and didn't assume that over time or with more education that the people who were uncomfortable with things like a long-term ground lease or a cap on appreciation, that they couldn't be converted to willing buyers in this category. So this is just from the people who responded to the survey who said, we don't have any problem with the long-term ground lease. We understand the cap on appreciation. And in fact, I will tell you from sitting in on 2 of the focus groups, your employees intuitively understand why those kinds of mechanisms need to be in place. They intuitively understand that it helps the school district as a whole if they don't get to make a market rate return when they sell the house, because it means that someone else coming in can afford to buy it basically on the same terms that, that they bought the house in the first place. And we then took all this information. Again, you see the range of from the most conservative estimate of demand of 307 units to actually the most aggressive estimate of demand at 733. And we came up with a program for what kind of housing and what we would have to be able to sell it for in order to make sure it's affordable for the categories of employees, what they make on these breakdowns. So we have a range of units, and that range of units runs from a 1,750 square foot single-family detached home at $490,000. Recall that earlier slide, that's actually slightly larger than the average sized home that's selling for more than $1.3 million. And it goes all the way down to $202,500. And the sales price per square foot ranges anywhere between $280 and $300 per square foot. Whereas you're in a market where selling prices for new product goes anywhere from $600 to $800 per square foot. Now let's talk about what kind of a program we're talking about. Again, remember, these are the sort of surrounding conditions for the Hidden Valley property. You have the Hidden Valley neighborhood on really almost 2 sides of the property. You have a steep slope up to Veronica Springs Road. You have the Parks family properties, which are being actively farmed, and then the Hillside House property over here, and Veronica Springs Road down to Las Positas. So just to bring it back into context, we looked at what the various environmental conditions are currently. We identified areas of live oak and vegetation that we may prefer to keep and build around as opposed to taking it out and mitigating it. You have to deal with the slope. You have existing active agricultural uses that require some buffering. Again, stands of trees and slope over here. So we started out by, rather than coming in and saying, here's a way to get housing out of this, we started out by doing the environmental analysis. And then we started to run through a variety of scenarios of how one might put the road through. However, again, from a land use approval standpoint, This road doesn't exist. There's an easement for it that actually shows it, and I believe it was originally intended to go from the current terminus at the bottom, what is now the bottom of Palermo, all the way out to Veronica Springs, but there is no road here currently, and this is an access issue that's of keen interest to, in particular, the Hidden Valley residents, because it means traffic coming through their neighborhood, which they feel is currently overburdened with traffic coming in and out. So that's an issue that's going to have to be dealt with, but we started to look at, if you could put a road through here, how would you do your circulation within the property and still take into account the various environmental constraints and the slope. We did a mathematical yield analysis just based upon typical densities for different types of product, and the development could range anywhere from 63 single-family detached to 154 multifamily. That's, again, putting aside any kind of land use constraints, but just saying on this piece of property, given its environmental constraints, how many units could you get on it? We then started to look more seriously at not just how you would lay the roads out, but how might you develop the housing in there. Again, bearing in mind that while the zoning for this site both contemplates and requires single-family detached homes, that 307 households that most conservative demand are not all households that either require or need or could afford a single-family detached home. So any kind of workforce housing development that you could do, should you decide to do one, is going to have to provide a range of housing, because indeed you employ a range of people, both a range in terms of what they're paid and a range in terms of what their household demographics are. So going back to something I said earlier, that the workforce housing model, the more units you're able to develop, the greater the revenue generation for the school district. We looked at what we would think would be a reasonable level of development on this site, looking to benefit the employees in the school districts and disregarding, for the purpose of this part of the exercise, the fact that this is well beyond what the zoning allows. We did a plan that involved putting in 135 dwelling units, and while we thought that the numbers worked very well and that the product type would be very well received by the employees who could live there, we also recognized that if there was going to be any kind of a cooperative relationship between the school district and the surrounding neighborhood residents, this was pretty much of a non-starter. But we thought it was certainly worth looking at the way it would be laid out and what kind of housing we could get on the site from the perspective of what are the needs of the school district's employees. So we ran through this entire exercise, and it was only until we got to the end of it that we could say, you know, we're not even comfortable going in and saying we think you ought to talk to the city and talk to the surrounding residents about putting 135 units of housing in here. These, by the way, are single-family detached lots. These trees in here correspond primarily, and in here, with the larger area that's primarily vegetation but does have some live oak. So the street orientation is as much a part of preserving existing stands of old growth oak as they are anything else. These are single-family detached lots around a cul-de-sac. These are garage townhomes, which is why you don't see a lot of surface parking. And then these are two-story flats that are parked on the outside, and it would be primarily 1- and 2-bedroom units. And that's basically the way that program broke down. There are 30 single-family detached lots, 33 attached homes or townhouses, and 72 flats. We then went back to the drawing board and said, is there a less dense configuration that we think still would make sense from the perspective of doing workforce housing development, but maybe would be more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. However, remember, this is 98 units. This is still a number of units over the 58 that we have told you in the market rate disposition option is what we would calculate as being the by right opportunity. So there's more open space. We have taken out a fair number. We were at 72 of the stacked flats. We're now at 48 of them, but we're still using the same product type. It actually ends up, these are all alley loaded. We also went to a completely alley loaded product for this, so you end up with a very nice street condition. And we tried to emulate the lot sizes in the surrounding neighborhood, including that 60-foot wide lot frontage here so that there was some transitioning between the existing neighborhood and the new development. But you can see then we go to a narrower lot size once you get into the development, and the farther back you get and the farther away from the existing Hidden Valley neighborhood, the more dense it becomes. And this is the development scenario that we ran all of our numbers on, and those were the numbers that yielded the both the upfront and the the 30-year calculation of return to the school district. I'm going to go through both site plans and then show the product types, just so you have an idea of what kind of housing we contemplate doing when we run these numbers. So here's the breakdown. You end up with fewer single-family detached lots, in part because we went to a conforming lot on the adjoining property line. That's really the only reason why we went from 30 to 23 is in the first iteration, they were all narrower lots. I believe they were anywhere from 50 to 30-foot wide lots. And by going up to the 60, we lost 7 lots in that process. 27 townhomes, and again, the big change is reducing from 72 to 48 the number of these flats. The Tatum site, here's again, just to refresh your recollection back, here are the constraints. 101 and the Southern Pacific Railroad. You have multifamily here and here. You have the shopping center down here. A road that, quite frankly, although we haven't designed it this way in our site plan, one could argue that if you were to put it through, would create a traffic reliever at Hollister and Turnpike by allowing traffic that comes off the 101 that wants to go in this direction toward the city of Goleta to avoid this intersection and actually come in through here. And if the school district were to consider doing development on Tatum, that's something that we think would take some of the traffic congestion off of this intersection that we've heard from the surrounding community residents is an issue. And would allow some relief from that traffic. Also would have potentially the same benefit for people who live back here and don't want to have to go through this intersection, but in fact, so there would be some money put into the development budget for example, signalizing this intersection and allow this road to go through, but we don't show that currently in the site plan. The site plan was laid out assuming that there would be that there'd be no idea of converting this basically into a secondary way to get back into these neighborhoods. And here are the site constraints for the Tatum site. You have a large area of biologicals plus slope here. You have another stands of old growth trees and I believe some other biologicals that are best left undisturbed. Another area here, then you have, again, the agricultural use, which land use requires that you at least provide some buffering to protect it. And I think I mentioned already that there's some relatively steep sloping here. We then went through the same exercise. We started to look at what are some ways to lay out interior streets. Now, it's not that this road doesn't cut through, but it's so circuitous that it's unlikely that somebody is going to intentionally pick this as a way to get around that intersection at Hollister and Turnpike. But the way it's drawn in currently, it certainly could be done. What we're suggesting is if that people agreed that there would be a broader community benefit to bringing the traffic through so the people who live back here don't have to go through this intersection, that this actually would end up being redesigned somewhat. We then went from that to a mathematical yield calculation and determined that you could, irrespective of what the zoning allowed you to do, you could get anywhere from between, at the low end, 74 single-family homes. The current zoning without the application of bonus density is actually 75. All the way up to 349 if you were to do nothing but medium density housing on the site. We did this just to get an idea of what the range of the housing units would be. But as you saw from the chart, we're actually end up not at this number certainly, but almost 3 times what the low end of this analysis yielded. We then went through the same process of what kind of development we could do if we were to lay the streets out in a particular pattern. This is one scenario that involved a combination of single-family detached townhomes and the same 2-story flats that are parked outside, but the townhouses and the single-family detached presumably would have their own garages to accommodate vehicles. And then we ended up here. There are not. I'm sorry. This is just the rendering, full rendering of the lower density option, which has the single-family detached townhomes and the stacked flats. And then for this one, which is the one that is currently in the disposition option for workforce housing, we contemplated a slightly higher density product, but that would not be surface parked, which is what you would normally see if you were doing any kind of like garden style apartment. So although there is some surface parking, this is auxiliary, and actually every unit in this building has parking underneath the building. That, by the way, is why if you were paying attention to those cost numbers, that's why these units happen to be $300 a square foot as opposed to being $260 or $280, because they have to carry the cost of this parking garage, or podium as we refer to it, on top of which these units are developed. In order to get an idea of what kind of housing we would propose to develop from a workforce standpoint, we spent a fair amount of time not only looking at architectural precedents in various parts of Santa Barbara, but also taking some cues from designs that either members of our team had done or that we had done in other developments. I'm just going to go through these quickly, but there is certainly a wide variety of product type within the city of Santa Barbara and within the county, and it runs the range from single-family detached to duplexes, whether they're detailed as, this is sort of a more traditional duplex, as opposed to these Laguna Court, which technically this is, I guess, a townhouse as opposed to even being a duplex, but it's detailed very nicely, almost like a single-family detached home. And so what we found is there's a broad range of product type in the marketplace that we could use to develop some prototypes for doing development, and they run the range from 4 to 6 dwelling units per acre up to much higher. And so we then went to work on what kind of housing exactly would we propose to develop. You saw before we had the square footages that we were proposed to develop, going from 1,750 square feet for the largest single-family detached down to, I think, about 795 square feet for a one-bedroom flat. So we've really taken it to the level of being able to say, if you were to go forward, we now have drawings and elevations of different product types that we could refine some of the cost numbers, but more importantly also give people an idea of what is it exactly that you might be proposing to develop as part of a recruitment and retention program. So we actually have 4 different floor plans currently for single-family detached homes, and this is the style. We're not at the point where they're rendered in color or laid out in a nice elevation, but this gives you an idea of the style of the housing, a combination of single-story and two-story, and in some of the two-story you have only a small element on the second story, and it's primarily a one-story floor plan. We then did the same thing with the townhouses, looking at trying to produce a range of townhouses again to make sure we have a variety of product, because you have a variety of employees and they have a variety of household demographics. This is a 2-story townhome where with garage parking in the back of the unit. This is intended as an alley-loaded product. This is what the second story would look like. These, by the way, are all in a separate set of exhibits, so anybody who's interested in the design aspects and the livability aspects of these units can look at them. And this is what an elevation of this product type might look like if it were to be developed. We then have the flats. As you can see, the parking is behind the units. There's a nice courtyard in between, and the units face onto those. I don't have an elevation of this, but it's basically a 2-story building because it doesn't require the parking to be put underneath, so you stay relatively close to the ground. And this was a product that we had adapted from some other contexts, which is essentially, from the street it reads as a 3-story building. It's technically a 4-story building, and the parking structure underneath is earth bermed, and the reason for earth berming it as opposed to putting it all the way under is if you made it completely subterranean, your costs go up by a factor of about 40% to do mechanical ventilation of the garage. This was an early iteration of what this might look like, and it's very interesting because it includes, among other things, a 1,500 square foot 2-story unit. which lives more like a townhouse, but has the advantage of having the parking underneath of the building. This is what it looks like in a little more detail. And here's basically from the front of the building, you have some guest parking and some auxiliary parking out here, and then a ramp down underneath into this garage area. And then you have 2 stair towers at either end and an elevator for coming up from the garage, because this technically, when you're in the garage, may have to go up 3 flights to get to your unit. And these are conceptual sketches of not of that building, but this is the way this kind of building would probably look in terms of massing and detailing. These, by the way, all of these renderings come from Lim Chang Rawling, which is our project architect for this, who designed the floor plans. So this is the type of building that we're talking about. Those were renderings. These are a couple of actual projects that they have done using this type of 3-story construction over podium parking. We think, obviously, we're in the business of doing workforce housing. We've not sort of concealed that. We believe that the review committee selected UNIDEB because we had that expertise in addition to the analytical skills with regard to the other aspects of real estate development. There are a number of benefits that we believe would inure to the school district with regard to doing workforce housing, but as you can see from the numbers, this is not going to be an easy process to go through. We've not run any kind of analysis to say, if you were to come back off of that 276 number, is there a point at which it becomes unviable or so much less viable that you're better off looking at a pure monetary return? That is something that the school board might want to have us consider, and now that we've constructed all the models and done all the work, rerunning some of those numbers would not be terribly difficult. If there was a request from the board to do that, I think we certainly could do that as part of the final report, at least provide one alternative. And we probably could do the same on the flip side for the Hidden Valley site. We've already run an analysis at 135 units. We've not provided you with financial analysis as to what that would mean to the school district financially. But clearly, you've got a demand that runs anywhere from 307 to into the 700s. And this is how people are responding when you're giving them the theoretical option of having a housing benefit. We believe that once it becomes more real, certainly it's going to be fairly easy to gravitate from the 307 to the 500 number. If you were to do both of these sites at the highest densities that are discussed in these site plans, you would barely get to that number in terms of meeting the demand for housing. So you're going to have some challenging choices to make as you look at these different options. That's really the end of the formal presentation. I appreciate your allowing me to take this much time to go through it. Hopefully this is not certainly going to be a substitute for going through the report on your own and coming back to us with comments and questions about it.
As I said, this is a preliminary report. UNIDEV agreed to a period for public comment, but importantly, so that the board could make sure that their questions were answered and that the report was complete. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. Do we have questions?
I'd actually like to hear
Ms.
the public
Rodriguez.
comment, and then I have some comments and questions.
Good. So maybe we can ask you to remain. No, definitely not. To remain while we take public comments, so that you can also hear the comments that the public are making, and then we may have additional questions that we would like to ask.
I think it'd be
If
very
that's okay.
helpful, Madam President, if we, my question about the timing of this 30-day period, I think the public might want to comment about that if we knew more about the schedule of things. You know, how long is there for the public to make input? What's the next stage, the next report? What comes after that? And when are the decisions being made? I think that'd be helpful to have that information in their hands before they make their comments.
Well, not having, well, I mean, I'm not sure I'm prepared to decide on that at this point, and we haven't read the full report. And the 30 days is only for input into the final report, but then once we have the final report, there'll be plenty of additional time for people to make input into what our decisions are going to be.
My point, Madam President, is that it's 30 days of prime vacation time. And that maybe if the clock could start at the end of the vacation period and then 30 days, that would give the public a chance to have thoughtfully looked at the report and comment. That's all. It's just, it seemed like very, and I understand that originally it was going to arrive earlier and that, you know, that it has been delayed, but the fact is that this is just the beginning of August and people are heading off on vacations, and the clock, if the clock starts tonight, you know, I'm not going to be reading this thing while I'm river rafting. I don't know about you folks.
Yes?
Yeah, that'd be acceptable to us, to have it, to extend the comment period to the end of September. I don't want to, certainly can't speak to the board's preferences, but from our perspective, we understand the logic behind wanting to have the 30-day period after, or substantially after the Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
I was going to ask for the same thing. And then distribution options available, which we can talk about later. But making sure that it's readily accessible and someone doesn't have to spend, 2 days downloading it or...
That's the thing that I'm concerned about, is how we make it accessible to people, especially people who may not have the technology to...
Well, we'll
to
give you a
access it.
series of locations, and in fact, by extending the period, that helps. For
Okay.
example, school libraries aren't going to be very available to people over the next 3 weeks. Well, school starts at the end of September.
August.
I mean August, sorry. Thank
Did you change the calendar without telling us, Dr.
No,
Sarver?
we didn't. We didn't. At the end of August, so that's 3 weeks from now. If we start the clock at that point, that would give us about 5 weeks.
Okay?
We could put them in high school libraries, for example.
Okay. Let's go on to public comment.
Can I just ask one more
Oh,
question?
I'm sorry.
If we have questions when we're reading this, how do we ask the questions and how do we go about, when will we see someone again to ask the question?
Good point.
You can direct those questions directly to us. You can send them to the superintendent's office. They can come via email, or they can come to the website. As you saw earlier, there was a website note. Let's see, I'll dig through.
I
and
believe
find
it's
it
on
here.
page 17.
Okay.
That's
We're
the
going to
fe-
get Mr.
feasibility
Smirnopoulos'
study.
email, are we?
Right, excuse me, feasibility study, is that the correct one?
That's correct.
At SB,
Right.
SD? Okay, thank
So-
you.
Yeah,
It's on page 17.
So we will be directing anything we get to this, as well as reading them ourselves.
So a question could be posed to this email address as well as a comment, and a response could be expected within 3 days,
what-
4 days?
Well,
the response would be contained in the final report.
Yes.
That's the process that we've agreed to.
in fact, I think it's important that we outline the purpose for this. The purpose is to have a complete report, not to have questions left unanswered. And if people need to make something terribly clear, for example, that seems to be implied, then they should ask that question directly. And just as an example, we had talked earlier about sale as is or sale fully entitled. Both of those would bring money in for capital development. The workforce housing and market rate housing project would bring money into the general fund. Well, I mean, we just talked about that. It is stated in here. In fact, I'll have to go through and see how it's stated in here, but we want to make that very obvious to people.
Okay, but that's important. So people who email to this address should not expect individual responses.
How about
Okay,
board members,
but
any
the
different?
information will be sort of taken into account in the final report.
Board members, any different treatment for board members? Well, I read it and I just have simple points that I just don't understand. You know, and it'd be nice to, before I go ahead and start writing a 5-page memo blasting something, to find out whether I really understood it properly, or praising something.
Couldn't we direct
Well-
those questions to the superintendent and he could get back to us?
Sure, I'll take the board members' comments.
Okay, thank you. And we might understand them if we read the whole document.
One other thing, it says 15 cents per page. I think it would be nice for people to know what the total cost would be if they were, so you don't have to make them do the math.
Times 700?
For the
100
whole thing,
$105 for the entire for including all the backup, et cetera. If we print it.
right. So 15 cents a page for whichever pages you want, or 105 for the entire thing. I think we need to, that's not in here, is it?
But people have access to it at library. People have
Right.
lots of access to it for free.
There's access on the
It's only if they
website,
want their
there's
own
access
hard
in
copy.
various locations.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to have us take public comment at this time. Yes. I'll remind those who are speaking at this time during public comment on this item that we do have policy that speakers, when addressing the board, please use the microphone and state your name. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes or less for public comment on any one. And we usually say that the time allowed for public comment on any one item is 20 minutes. We will exceed that because of the number of speakers we have. But because we will be exceeding that, we will ask you to try to be sure to contain your comments to 3 minutes. Speakers may not give time to other speakers, and written comments may also be submitted. So if you don't have a chance to say everything that you want to say, please take advantage of the written comment possibility to give us your comments. Many of you have addressed comments to us in writing. The board has received numerous letters, et cetera, emails. So if you don't get a chance to say everything you want, please take advantage of that opportunity and do send us your comments. We appreciate the fact that so many of you have taken the time to turn out tonight and sit through the presentation to get the information and are here to share with us your ideas on this as well. So we will begin.
Dan Oroz. Oroz?
Oh, Dan
Excuse me.
Oros. Okay.
Michael Self, followed by Michael Self.
Okay.
Board members, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to the board. My name is Dan Oros, and I live on Barcelona Drive in Hidden Valley. I've lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, and during that time, I've really seen an increase in traffic, auto traffic in the area. I, like most of my neighbors, were concerned about the increase in traffic, and we're really concerned about the density of this project. I'm sort of condensing this in the interest of time, but I just want to ask that the board seriously consider, listen carefully to the concerns expressed by the Hidden Valley Residents Association and others that live in the neighborhood, and to help us maintain the area as a low-density residential neighborhood. That's condensing this, and I'll send you a 2-page memo.
Thank you, Mr. Ros. Okay.
Michael Self, followed by David Lane. Oh,
Okay, Mr. Self is not here.
David Lane, followed by Jim Holtman.
I did write that he left.
My name is David Lane. I'm from Hidden Valley. And I was wondering if all of you have been out to see our field. It's a real natural area. We have one of the major creeks of Santa Barbara. We have a large coyote pack, which we listen to at night. A bobcat and a mountain lion have even been seen in the field. We have hawks, owls, even a roadrunner. It's a real natural area for kids to be raised in, for that creative experience that most kids today are not raised in. It would be ironic if the Department of Education were to take this away from the kids. This is an important part of every child's education. So we would hope that you could preserve the land for the way it is today, for the enjoyment of people, for kids to be raised, and for the preservation of the animals. It's a real natural area. And it's the last one that we have, if we lose it. And you can conserve this land, I understand, with tax breaks under the conservation program of the state of California. By just conserving it and preserving it, you would get tax breaks and, in that way, an income, and have it both ways. But kids need this. We need kids raised in this kind of environment if we're going to produce people tomorrow that stops the devastating of this planet, which is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Jim Holtman, followed by David Cluse.
Try to take this out of
So,
the holder.
I'm sorry, just before you speak, I did want to comment that I will give you a 30-second heads up when your time is going to run out. So if I interrupt you,
Oh,
just,
that's fine.
it's just to let you know.
I don't have any prepared comments. I don't think
Okay.
I can go quite that far.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want to
Try.
surprise you.
I don't know. Look, I love school teachers as much as anybody else, but I regard them as government employees, and it always bothers me a little bit when I see government employees getting a deal. That's my first comment. I'm philosophically opposed to the idea, and a lot of nice taxpayers out here who are knocking themselves out to maintain their properties in Santa Barbara without anybody's help. The other, and that. Currently, Santa Barbara home rentals haven't really increased much over the past several years. I know because I try to rent a home out. And while local rents are still relatively low, the housing's there. If someone wants to experiment with investing in the real estate market, they can buy something in another area and rent it out just like I have to. So that's a philosophical comment. The other thing is the density. I'm not as familiar with the Hillside property, even though I'm originally a Mesa resident. But out near Turnpike, the density of the Tatum property, as proposed here, would certainly be a crush on that neighborhood. I have several neighbors here who have also come along, and they, at times of the day, they've got gridlock in that area. I don't live anywhere near it. I don't have a financial interest in how this works out. It wouldn't affect any of my property. But I drive through the area, and as a native of Santa Barbara, I've driven through it for many years, and it's become quite dense in the last 5 to 10 years. The other thing is, this idea of a long-term lease looks to me like a way to finesse the law. There was a reason for this law, that selling property went to capital improvement. I don't know exactly what the reasoning is, but here you've got a company that's figured out a way to go around a state law. Well, I'm not so sure I like that. I think state laws have a purpose. Lastly, if you're going to put money into the general fund, it speaks to my first issue of special treatment. Or are we then going to raise all the teachers' salaries after that, so that they get a double bonus from this? I love them; they're wonderful. My wife's a teacher, but at some point you have to say, "Hold on a second." And
30 seconds.
I made it that far. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holtman.
David Cluse, followed by Charles Kent.
Good evening. David Close, 30-year resident of the Goleta Valley, 30 years teaching in various forms currently at City College, 20-year resident near the Tatum property. I had some prepared comments. I'm going to start with just some comments on tonight's presentation. First of all, given that most of us work 1 to 2 jobs, 50 to 60 hours a week to support living here, it's highly unlikely that many are going to digest a 74-page document with attachments. We are largely looking to you, the decision makers, to use your staff and your own know-how to go through that, know your community, and act responsibly, choose responsibly on behalf of the majority. I think that's reasonable. Point two, I think UNIDEV rightly perceives that Santa Barbara residents are and should be passionate about our land use. It's not for us just about PowerPoint slides and numbers that we all know statistics can be twisted very easily to look one way, but the reality turns out to be something else. This is what most of us experience in life. The rational part for us is that common sense people can look around California and we see what's happened in almost every nice area. Orange County, LA, San Fernando Valley, the extended San Diego area, and now even Sacramento, east of Sacramento. It's just mass developer mania, and it's ugly, and it doesn't promote a good quality of life. There's not many Santa Barbaras left, and we ask you to preserve the uniqueness that we have, which means we're not going to get everything we want. You don't get something for nothing, right? There's going to have to be some trade-offs. So the problems that UNIDEV mentioned, I would submit to you, are not just teacher problems, they're doctor problems. Doctors can't come here and live either. So I think it's unrealistic to kind of pigeonhole this into this, even though that's your context, which I understand and appreciate. It's true of everybody who wants to come to Santa Barbara. This is a larger problem. And I would submit to you that teacher turnover is a normal side effect of a high-priced area and California's swarming overpopulation. And that maybe that trade-off is not so bad, if you could just consider that point. That maybe that's going to be one of the side effects of living in one of the nicest remaining communities in California, is that your teachers will only cycle through every 2 or 3 years or 5 years or whatever. The real question is, are you having trouble hiring teachers? I teach at City College. I see no shortage of people that want to teach there. So it may not be optimal, but we're in a trade space, right? It's not going to be a perfect world here. So the trade-off becomes down to, do we want to ruin the community or live with some of these trade-offs? I'm being a little exaggerated just for simplicity, but I think that may not be a bad trade. I think an example like the fact that was mentioned about having anyone, I live near the Tatum property, the concept of putting a road through parallel to Hollister is somehow going to relieve traffic. Those of us who live there know this is a fantasy. All you're going to do is have more congestion at the intersection of this new road and Turnpike, because there's only 2 outlets. There's Turnpike and there's Patterson, and there's Hollister. Again, you don't get something for nothing. So I think we need to be realistic about these plans, stay grounded. I would ask you to be mindful that UNIDEV, and I appreciate them saying so, by their own admission, their specialty is developing workforce housing. And workforce housing, though it's a nice use of euphemism and seemingly important today, it may not be possible in the form that they are outlining.
I'm sorry, Mr. Close, I've inadvertently given you an extra minute, so could I ask you to wrap up, please?
Yes. More points for next time. Let me just say this. The problem we need to solve, California's systemic problem, is unchecked swarming overpopulation. And until that's the headwater of the problem. And until the state and local communities resist and thus deal with that problem, all these little things downstream are just a drop in the bucket.
Thank you, Mr. Close.
Charles Kent, followed by Gary Earl.
Good evening.
And I apologize, I'll try to be more on top of the timing, and I'll give you your 30 seconds of
Okay.
heads up. Thank you.
I'm Charles Kent. I've been practicing law since '62 here. And I live at Sungate Ranch, which is right down the road from the Tatum property. And I'm a member of the Coalition for Accessible Planning. Well, I see a couple dozen of our neighbors here, including a lot of coalition members. And I won't talk about Hidden Valley, but as to the Tatum property, first of all, to encore what Mr. Close said, it's total fantasy that any additional road coming along a little edge behind Vaughn's and up to San Simeon would do anything. all you're doing is finding another way to get stopped at Turnpike. And if you remember during the Painted Cave fire, nobody could get out on the Turnpike or the freeway. It was total blockage everywhere. And the Tatum property is just about a mile north of the footprint from the Painted Cave fire. One of our big concerns with that property being developed at high density is that it backs right up against the railroad tracks and freeway, and there's no way out. You've got a grade school right there. If you had a Painted Cave fire during the day when people were in school, including at San Marcos High School, it would be total gridlock and no way for anybody to escape. Low density is another matter there. Many of us are very much in favor of you doing workforce housing. We'd like you to do it at the present density, which is 3.3 per acre. Then you add the 30% inclusionary for the county. That would take you to maybe 4 or 5. At Sungate Ranch, we have 4.5 density, and we have some inclusionary condos there. And it's a really nice living environment. We'd like to see that continued with the development of the Tatum property. On timing, we don't have a growth management ordinance in the eastern Galita Valley right now. When City Galita happened, our growth management ordinance was done in. It didn't just expire, it was rescinded. And each year, the growth management studies were showing that we have no carrying capacity left in that area. Traffic, water, air pollution are really strong concerns, and each study of the growth management committee was showing that. And we have to get a new growth management ordinance going and study these things before we start talking about any development. And more importantly, along with that, we're just now getting ready to start our first community plan since Galita Cityhood.
30 seconds.
Cityhood. And that's designed to show what our carrying capacity could be for developments in that neighborhood. And that plan won't be done for 2 more years. And the members of the coalition feel we shouldn't do any density, any type of density and construction until the community plan is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.
Gary Earl, followed by John Caulfield.
Hi, I'm Gary Earl, a resident of Galita Valley. I live near the Tatum property. It's hard to take Mr. Smirniotopoulos' presentation seriously. He starts off by saying he was tasked with giving you options and was not favoring any of them, but then went on to spend most of the time talking about the workforce housing option of a massive upzone to 276 units. I'm here to tell you as a community leader in the Galita Valley that if you seek this option, which will require a 300% plus upzone, you will receive massive community resistance and opposition to this project. Citizens of Galita Valley will take every political and legal action necessary to stop this development. Show you how out of touch Mr. Smirniotopoulos is with the community. He suggested connecting Turnpike with Hollister, a shortcut through San Simeon, down Walnut. That's exactly what the community does not want. A project of this size, 276 units, will add 2,000 to 3,000 car trips per day to those neighborhoods, just from that development, not mentioning the additional traffic from Turnpike if that San Simeon is connected through that property. Now, this property is bounded on one side by El Camino Elementary School and on the other side by San Marcos High School. I don't know if you've all been out there and looked at the mess at San Simeon and San Marcos High School on Turnpike at 8 o'clock in the morning when everybody's trying to get to the 101 on-ramp. Students are trying to cross the road on their bicycles, skateboards, and other things, and parents are trying to drop off their kids to the front of San Marcos. If you create this development and dump an additional 2,000 cars in the morning per day into that intersection, you're not only going to be educating our children, you're going to be creating a situation where you may get some of them killed. And I'm not joking. Go there and take a look. I want to just a couple other things. I want to say that Mr. Smirniotopoulos admits, and has admitted in the past, there's nothing scientific about his survey, and that he has a tremendous potential conflict of interest with that survey, in that Unidev may benefit financially in the millions of dollars if this property is developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl.
John Caulfield, followed by Nick Arnold.
Thank you, school board members, for letting me speak. I'm a member, I live in Hidden Valley down there, and I just wanted to say a couple things from what I've heard today off the bat is that I think that Santa Barbara is in need of a comprehensive plan that folds in your plans, because lately, in the past couple of years, I've noticed what I perceive to be a 30% increase in vehicular traffic around Mission Street, around Las Positas, and around La Cumbre, because when you get to where you're south of the freeway, the 101, I think Mission, Las Positas, and La Cumbre are single-lane roads, so that people and my neighbors are telling me it's starting to look a little bit more like Santa Monica. The density is growing really quickly. I go to lunch sometimes and come back from Mission Street. It's traffic all the way from State Street all the way to the 101, and this is not even at rush hour. So in terms of the planning of our wonderful city, and the other gentleman said that it's a unique city, it really is a unique city, is our model for the city Santa Monica, Encino, or something like that, is not to put down those cities, but they are rather large urban cities, and I think that the area around Las Positas is really more rural to suburban, and with the plan of putting these homes there, it makes it more of an urban feel. I'll give you an example. If you drive down Las Positas from around Modoc down to Cliff Street, you see about 120 houses within about a few hundred feet either side of the road. Well, if you take into consideration the development that was proposed tonight and include the development that's probably going to be proposed by the Hillside House, you more than triple the density down Las Positas, which is a one-lane road. And if you take into consideration that you have a hill on each side of Las Positas, it's a very hilly area that's not really set up for high-density housing because you can't easily access roads around there. You get the creek on one side that's already has an issue with erosion, and I think that it's just I don't know if you add that development there, it's going to change the entire feel of the community. It's really going to change it. You know, another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is why is UNIDEV commenting upon teachers' retention and things like that? It really is a conflict of interest. You folks, you know, respectively work for the school board, and I think that it's an important part of what you do to really assess why the teachers want to come here to live and why they may want to leave. Some of them obviously leave because they want to get a better job and things like that. So I think that I feel there was a lot of bias in the presentation about the school teacher thing, and as you pointed out, sir, that other communities that are in California that are also very high-priced have a similar problem, and so that to represent it as a problem of school teachers is just biased in their favor, and I quite frankly don't.
30
don't
seconds.
buy that. To summarize, I think that it's very important to take into consideration factors like the median price of housing has already dropped. The local realtor sent me something that suggested the median price of housing in Santa Barbara is going to go down, has gone down to about $1 million. And so how do you fairly compensate for this price difference between regular housing that we have to buy ourselves and then this subsidized housing? The plan is not very good, and high density is not good for Las Positas Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caulfield.
Nick Arnold, followed by Chris Hartman.
Hi, my name is Nick Arnold. I live in Hidden Valley. Feel nervous right now. A lot of what I wanted to say has already been articulated very well by our previous speaker, so I won't repeat. I'll try not to repeat what has already been said. My understanding is that one of the points that UNIDEV was going to look at was the value of holding the land. I still haven't heard any discussion of that option. I wonder if that option's still being considered. What would be the value of holding it? I think that, as people said, this would be kind of a gift to Santa Barbara. Maybe if nothing was done with the land, you held on to it for a while. I know there was regrets about, I think the school board gave up lands in the past, had deep regrets about doing that. So maybe it's, I don't know how much of your budget this would help to supplement, but you know, maybe you should learn to live within your budget. Try to run the school better. I'm a little nervous about sorry, a little nervous about the there's a clock here. A little nervous. I thought I had to turn around. A little nervous about the school board spending large amounts of time on building housing, running housing, subsidized housing. I think the city of Santa Barbara is having a challenging enough time running subsidized housing. They've been under attack lately. Those are some concerns I have as well. I'm also a teacher. I did drive to Santa Maria for 6 years. I was going to drive to Bakersfield. I live in Santa Barbara. I drove to Riverside for a year to teach at UC Riverside. People love to teach. They'll come here and teach. I don't think I was a bad teacher because I drove further away. It's mostly because of The teachers that want to do the work and stay longer and do the extra work will. It doesn't matter whether they live in town or not. I certainly did more when I was at, did a lot of work when I was at Allen Hancock College. I guess two other things. One thing is that when the bond measure, I think it was originally passed in 1998 to build the 3 schools on the Hidden Valley property, the school board made a promise at a meeting at Val Verde that Veronica Springs would not, or Palermo Road would not connect through to Las Positas. That was an original promise that was made, and yet it's back on the table. So I think, again, setting an example for our students of keeping your promise, it would be good to not consider that. I heard the concerns from the people at the Tatum property about having this road and what that would do to their neighborhood. I think also you'd be endangering children on Palermo Drive if that road went through. It would be a shortcut where people have already driven. You should drive down Palermo Road.
30 seconds.
You should drive down Palermo Road if you haven't already and see what you think that would be like. People are already, it's already very dangerous. I try to avoid that road. Again, please don't ruin Santa Barbara. I know it's not fair for everybody to have housing that's out of reach. A few years ago when people were buying houses for $800,000 next door to people that bought their house for $400,000, they were complaining about Prop 13. I don't hear those people complaining today now that the price has gone up to $1.6 million. Don't know if that's relevant. Thank you.
Chris Hartman, followed
Thank
by...
you, Mr. Arnold. Sorry.
Chris Hartman, followed by Catherine Kelly Streeton.
Members of the board, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. I'm Chris Hartman, Vice President of Hidden Valley Homeowners Association, and we've done a survey of the residents of Hidden Valley, and the conclusion that they came to was that they would in fact be in favor of developing that site with the current density that we have in the neighborhood, which would be for market rate housing. And the problems that we have, which I don't know if we've beaten the drum hard enough on it. The major problem we have is traffic there in Hidden Valley. During rush hour, we're at a D level currently, which F level means the traffic's not moving at all. So any type of increase in the density would cause a huge problem with the traffic, frankly, and would have to be mitigated. Quality of life, of course, is a pretty big issue as well. Right now there's 2 nursing homes in Hidden Valley, Val Verde and Vista Del Monte. There's a lot of children, and there's a huge element of danger to have a lot of traffic with the elderly and with the small children that currently live in that neighborhood. High density certainly is not the option that Hidden Valley wants. Hidden Valley would like market rate housing with single family homes. And we would also be in favor of looking into a land swap. If there was a more appropriate property downtown that could handle high density, if that is the desire of the board, we'd certainly be in favor of looking into that. And access is the biggest concern we have. Hidden Valley site, as you know, has one access point in and out. And I can tell you I was there during the Painted Cave fire, and there was no way out. And if the fire had continued, you know, it would have been a huge issue, and that's something that we really think needs to be addressed because that site is not appropriate for high density. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman.
Catherine Kelly Streeton, followed by Patty Close.
Hi, my name is Kelly Streeton. I'm a 2nd District resident. I live about 2 blocks from El Camino School with my... sorry. I live about 2 blocks from El Camino School with my husband, relatively recent resident. Would pretty much echo the comments of the gentleman who's with the Coalition of Sensible Planning. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name at the moment. But I'm pretty middle of the road when it comes to affordable housing, workforce affordable housing, generally in favor of it. There have been a lot of concerns here reflected tonight, you know, traffic congestion, increased density, things like that, that resonate with me. I feel a general conflict because that I know that there are places all over the world that have handled increased density for hundreds and hundreds of years with a relatively good standard of living. what I would exhort you as the board, as representative of our communities, to take into account is that we are hoping you will make a decision for us, for our school districts, for us as residents. We are putting our trust in you, and we hope that we can find a decision that is reflected, we hope that your decision reflects what we feel in our hearts, is that we want a better life for our children, we want a better life for our families, we want a good life as Santa Barbara residents. I'm sure everybody does. That's about all.
Thank you, Ms. Streeton.
And last, Patty Close.
Hi. My name is Patty Close, and I live about a half a block from the Tatum property, and I walk there all the time. And today I walked there, and I was listening to the noise level, and I heard birds, and I heard children, and it was quite pleasant. And I was projecting what it would be like to have twice as many, and the reason I can say twice as many is that I've walked the neighborhood many times for issues and elections, and I know how many flyers you have to print up to hit every house, from Hollister all the way to the end to the creek, and all the way up to the railroad tracks, and down San Marcos Road. And for all of those houses, it's about the same number as they want to put on the Tatum property. Now, if you take that little piece of property that's Tatum property and think about how many people you have and how many houses you have in that whole area, we double it. And so there would not be, you wouldn't be hearing any birds or any children playing. All you would be hearing is traffic. My husband was a teacher and still is a teacher, and I'm very sympathetic to the issues of teachers finding homes, but I also am concerned about taking a small number of people in our community and giving them a benefit that is a detriment to a larger number of people. We have 3 streets, San Marcos, San Simeon, and Walnut, which will become thoroughfares. The noise level, everything. Our house already backs up to San Marcos Road, and I can tell you the soot and the noise that comes from that road already. When I sweep my patio, it's black from the soot. The dust coming off that road is black, and living behind a busy street and knowing that the traffic would be probably doubled or not tripled is a major factor in all the people who live around there. And because I walk the neighborhood and I've had conversations with many people, they're very afraid that their whole way of life is going to be drastically affected. My question is, I didn't see in any of the presentation anything about equity sharing, and I would like to say that there are places where that's a very good option. If the school district equity shares for their teachers, they can live wherever they want. They can pick their own place. If we did low density in this development and forget this land lease thing and equity shared with the teachers themselves.
30 seconds.
Thank you. That might be an option, and I'm not sure why it wasn't considered. I know that Westmont does equity sharing with their staff, and that's a real viable option to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Close. Okay, that concludes public comment. As we stated at the beginning, we will be having a great deal more discussion on this, so we certainly don't need to try to address all of our questions tonight, but does the board have any questions that they want to raise at this point? No? Oh, I'm sorry, you do? Okay. Ms. Rodriguez.
First of all, thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and participating in the discussion.
I'm sorry, public comment is closed. I'm sorry, we don't take public comment from the floor.
Anyway, thank you, everybody that was here tonight, and I know we'll be seeing a lot more of you at future meetings and discussions, and as a board member that, like the rest of us, am a resident of this community, and I'm very fortunate to own a home. I realize many, many people in our community cannot afford to own a home. So I see the statistics that Mr. Smirniotopoulos shared with us, and it's pretty staggering, not just for our district employees, but for the whole community. And I think I'm trying to see the big picture and the small picture, and I live in a neighborhood where there's mixed density. There's some high density and a lot of single-family homes, and I can certainly appreciate concerns about traffic. I spend a lot of my day driving, so I understand that, and I just wanted to express that the board's challenge is to look not only at the impacts on the community, but also to consider, and I don't mean so much for the workforce housing issues, but for our own very, very rapidly declining revenues. We have extremely short funds in our district. So what has prompted us to start this discussion wasn't just workforce housing options. That certainly would be a nice outcome of all of this, I think, for the teachers or the staff, but we're also looking at how to run a school district with less and less money and declining enrollment. So just to express why we came to this point in the first place is to look at what can we do with these two properties, what would be in the best interest of our district, balancing what's in the best interest of the community and the residents and the homeowners and our employees. So that, I just wanted to sort of paint that picture for you, that that's how we, sitting up here, are looking at all of this, and we've been waiting, as you have, to see what would the options be, because that's how we will make our decision. Is it's not strictly on dollars and cents, because certainly there's a lot of other issues to consider, but we've been just as anxious as you, I think, to hear this discussion and to talk about these issues. And I think what's sad for me as a member of this community for 30 years is to see it's hard to have a healthy community when so many people are unable to stay here, to live here. And I don't know the answer to that. There's many, many of us in employers in the community struggling with this. I don't think it's helping any of us that we're facing this, just like other communities in California. And I hope we can find creative solutions. I mean, maybe we need to look at different ways of funding things and different solutions than we've ever looked at before. And I'm hoping that this district can do that in partnership with our local cities and the county and other large employers, because it's hurting all of us. And I feel it as a resident. I feel the traffic increase, but I also feel the fact that there are so many people in this community who are suffering financially because of this. And we just need to work together, I think, to look at the big picture as well as the smaller picture of how it affects us individually. And I'm trying to do that as a resident as well as a board member.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Anyone else? Dr. Noel?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate very much that you came, and I think we all need to hear from you. I had several thoughts, but I have been concerned about this project for a long time, and I guess it started when I went to the first meeting of a planning committee, and the first 45 minutes were spent planning strategies to isolate someone named Gary Earl. And I didn't quite understand that. He was characterized as an urban guerrilla, and it just seemed to me troubling that should be what's going on in a behind-the-scenes process dealing with a public issue. I then became more concerned when I learned that the firm that we retained to do the research to determine the demand for housing stands, if we choose workforce housing, and they are chosen as the developing firm, stands to make 6% of the total cost of development. Now, I'm troubled by that, not from the business point of view, but I'm a scholar. I'm a professor from UCSB, and I taught research methods for a long time. And it's just, for me, structurally, has nothing to do with people. I think the people are all acting in good faith. But structurally, you don't go to people, to an organization that has vested interests to get objective answers. And I just don't. And then I listened tonight, and it just occurred to me, I mean, there's bias. We taught our students and my graduate students, bias is insidious. We all have to guard against it, and no one can guard against it in himself very well. It takes, that's what the scientific community is about, is a criticism. It's important. Here's a bias, for example. We keep talking about on these pictures. God, I love to look at those beautiful architectural renderings. I want one of those. But But we're talking about new housing. We're talking about median level of price for new homes, 1.3 million, I think, was quoted. Well, when you're 25, 30 years old, any of us were in a position to go out and buy a new home at median price? What about the first quartile? What about the second quartile? What about the little bungalow? We had to buy a little bungalow, and you know, then fortunately it's in Santa Barbara. Your equity goes up. You refi. You build a room for the. You know, we did it for 2 kids, and you grow that way. And yet the kind of bias that's built into this analysis is kind of takes it that, oh, we're talking about people early in their career, the first 7 years, can't buy in Santa Barbara, i.e. cannot buy because the median price of new housing is 1.3 million. That doesn't give, to me, a totally accurate picture. So I'm troubled by these kinds of things, and I would hope that before we reach some decisions, that we could get a third opinion by someone who doesn't have any interest in the outcome whatsoever. And that's really all I have to say for tonight. I'm sure I'll have more to say at other occasions.
I'm sure you will. I think we all will have a great deal to say, and I'm going to try to pull this to a close because we're going to have additional discussion on this, and I really do think it probably will behoove all of us to have read the full report, or at least a great deal of it before we continue with our discussion, so that we are, you know, sort of much more aware of all the details about which we are speaking. But I just want to echo some of the things that Ms. Rodriguez mentioned in terms of the board's commitment to try to understand what all the ramifications are for each of the possibilities, the options that we are looking at. And I just want to assure the public, I lived in the Hidden Valley area. I live in Calle de los Mingos. I now live right off San Marcos Road, so I live right a couple of blocks away from the Tatum property. I drive that intersection at Turnpike and Hollister every single day. So I know exactly what we're talking about. I'm certainly quite familiar with the area. I think probably even those who don't live in that area probably are pretty familiar with that area. It's a pretty well-traveled place. So I think we are certainly committed, even though ultimately we may reach different conclusions from each other, from various different groups in the community. We won't probably all agree on every single thing, but I think we are all committed to trying to look at all the possibilities, what's going to best serve the interests of the community, the interests of the students, and the interest of the district financially. And it's going to be quite a chore to try to balance those competing interests. And you know, we have sort of taken on this role, that we're in this position that we are the ones to do this. It's not going to be an easy task, but we will certainly continue this discussion. We hope to hear from, I'm sure we will hear from all of you several more times. We will hopefully hear from many others in the community as well. And we will just have to try to do the best we can and hope that we achieve some degree of, I'd like to say consensus, although that may be wishful thinking, but at least some degree of agreement. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you taking your time to enjoy this level of involvement in the community decisions that we have to make. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again. And at this point, we will take a short recess.
We are back, only 3 strong now.
Where's your crown?
And we're up to F2. Go ahead.
May I comment on the rest of the agenda items tonight? As we discussed during the break, F2 is Mary's final opportunity to present this to the board, so we didn't want to pull that item. F3, which is the district's presentation of the initial collective bargaining proposal with the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. We will take comments on not at the board meeting, but I will take comments on. We'll bring those back to the board at our next meeting. We would normally put this on the next agenda for action, so we will plan to do that. We'll bring this item back to the next agenda as an action item. F4, we will postpone the report on the 2006-07 state budget, and F5, which is a report on potential budget additions or reductions to the elementary district budget. Again, it's Mary Stark's final opportunity to talk to the board about this issue, so we should continue with that item. I'm sure this is going to last until after 10:30.
I will try to interject some brevity in this. I really do appreciate this opportunity to be with you at this final board meeting during my tenure here for almost 3 years. And there were some major projects that I took on, and I used to use the analogy, several metaphor analogies, whatever they are. The English teachers would know which in particular. But when I first got hired here, and one was that it was like taking the Titanic with a rope in my teeth and trying to swim as fast as I could to keep it from the glacier.
That's a simile.
Thank you. Simile. Thank you. And the other image I used to tell people was like, I don't know if, when I was a little girl, there used to be Ed Sullivan. They used to have the guy that would get on TV and he would twirl the plates and then keep the plates going as fast as he could. I felt like that. Like any minute now, one of those plates was going to crash. But we made an intense amount of progress in the last 3 years. And one of the major areas that financially was of concern that we jumped on as soon as we could was the cafeteria fund. The production of all that comes out of all the kitchens. I've brought this to you since February of 2006. However, you've had financial updates since in 03-04 when we first became aware that we needed to get on top of accounting and internal controls. We needed to get on top of accountability for inventory, production, the nutrition guidelines, and just with the direction of Frank Lynn, working with David Hetyock and Debbie Badger, you know and have had consistent reports on not only the fiscal solvency status of that fund, but also wellness program updates, nutrition guidelines, a nutrition task force. There's been an intense concerted effort. What I wanted to bring to you this evening, and my understanding is consultant Carolyn Larson from Veronique Trine Day will be here at any time. But meanwhile, since she and I have corroborated on this and with the staff as well to a large extent, I want to reiterate for you what I've been telling you and ask you to give us direction because of this unique opportunity to really tighten the solvency of the cafeteria funds. Oh, me? Okay, here we go. Reminder, $1 million deficit spending took place between 1998, 1999, and 2003, 2004 that had been in reserves. But every year the cafeteria fund was in fact deficit spending. $515,000 in a loan was made in 04-05 from the elementary and high school districts. You recall that for operations and equipment. The shortfall in 05-06 as we're closing the books is projected to be $171,000. Now, that is a decreasing amount from the $515,000 the previous year. It also represents that there's been some internal revenue enhancements and internal accounting controls that have dropped it from $515,000 to around $171,000. And we're not finished closing the books, by the way. And that decreasing rate is a good thing. And then we also, oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. We have a projected balanced budget in fiscal year 06-07, but that balanced budget, as you will recall when you approved it, was no repayment of the loans so far from the cafeteria fund, and it included a continued effort to achieve efficiencies so that we would have no decreasing, declining ending balance. And a recap for you as well. Revenue enhancement items that have been used to date, meal fee increases in last year likely helped us to get to a much smaller decline. We also just approved a new meal fee increase in 06-07. And San Marcos 9th and 10th grade campus was closed. That was an item that ended up providing some revenue enhancement. And we'll talk further about how that could be expanded. We also improved inventory and accounting internal controls, expanding the point of sale system. The board will recall doing that initially in 04-05. And standardized menus is also bringing us some internal controls over inventory. So we walk into 06-07 with a balanced budget with no repayment of loan. We'd likely be able to maintain that balanced budget, but the concern for this board is the long-term, 2007, 2008, and beyond. Labor and delivery costs continue to rise faster than the COLA. And projected major infrastructure and equipment costs, if 13 kitchens continue, have no funding dollars available to them. You know that we're talking primarily, this is the elementary district, primarily is the production kitchens. There are some in the high school district. There are no bond funds available to continue infrastructure changes in the kitchens. So we come to the point, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so used to having a techie. Unique opportunity, and I brought this to you before, expansion of the Santa Barbara High School main production kitchen. That kitchen at this time, right before it went into construction, and it was taken down, if you'll recall, and Mr. Mayros is here to give you an update on that construction, already requires a major remodel because when they went into that kitchen just to replace flooring and roofing, if that's correct, they ended up finding a whole host of things that entailed a much larger project. So it's already under construction. It was already preparing 40% of the meals. It was a Measure V project and would continue to be a Measure V project, so the budget for the construction, continued remodel of that kitchen would come from those bond funds. Other funds available would be deferred maintenance for some of the installation of upgraded equipment to expand the main production kitchen, and also developer fee funds because there's been a growth in student population at Santa Barbara High School. So there'd be a good source of funding that would not necessarily be available for the future for infrastructure of this continued 13 production kitchens rather. You know, at this time I think...
How much Measure V money was spent on that kitchen?
I'm going to take a moment and turn this over to Dave and Carl as far as presentation to you on what's been going on at that kitchen.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary. Dr. Noel, on the consent agenda tonight, you approved a completed project, and that is the amount of money that was spent on the kitchen. That was $299,471.38. That contract was originally let as about a $450,000 construction contract. When that kitchen was torn into as part of that project, we discovered a number of things, and let me just list a couple of those here for you. We discovered that the structural framing was damaged by dry rot. We discovered mold in the freezer, the walk-in refrigerator, and in the walls. We had some irreparable deterioration of the freezer and walk-in refrigerator. We had refrigeration system leaks. We had failed and failing plumbing. We found non-compliant and substandard electrical installations. We had differing ceiling conditions. We had additional hazardous material abatement, and we had a non-compliant fire suppression system. All of those things resulted in change orders to the contract just to get the building how it is today, basically gutted. So all of those items, the change orders, were starting to add up. In the meantime, we decided it was in the best interest of the district to terminate the existing contract. If we'd have continued, we'd have had massive change orders. We'd have probably been better off rebidding that work as a savings to the district. And some of those change orders for individual items may have exceeded 10% of that construction contract amount, and then we wouldn't have been able to do those change orders. We would have had to rebid those parts of the project, plus the contractor was going to continue to charge us for him to stand by while we decided what to do. That's why there was that notice of completion given tonight to terminate that contract, spending approximately $300,000 of the $450,000 that was originally allocated towards that project. And that's where that kitchen stands today.
So we now have an empty room.
Which is where we come to with the unique opportunity that creates for us, because there is a funding source to develop that kitchen into a main production kitchen that would provide up to 90% of all meal preparation. And this is not only recommended by the outside consultants, Vavrinic, Trine Day, but is recommended by all the staff in the Nutrition Services Department and in my department, because that type of infrastructure that we were talking about that expanded that project from the original cost to the projected cost would be found as soon as we had to go in and start replacing some of the dying freezers and other production kitchens. Once we opened up, say, where were those big freezers that the media covered for us? Santa Barbara Junior High School? Okay. Dos Pueblos High School? And it's likely and has been projected that it could go anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million to start replacing kitchen infrastructure once you got in to replace aging and dying equipment with no funding source. So this is a reminder to the board of what the current configuration is. Santa Barbara High School was already providing 40% of the meals prepared for these satellite entities, Santa Barbara Community Academy, Montecito Union, Roosevelt, the student store at Santa Barbara High School, and so on. And then the remainder of these 12 production kitchens were also in operation, with one kitchen, Monroe, also serving a satellite of Washington. So that's where we're getting the 13 production kitchens from. What we're proposing is that this main production kitchen that was preparing 40% of the meals move to this configuration. The main production kitchen at Santa Barbara High School now takes on all the production kitchen main preparation work, except for OAS to continue as a satellite kitchen, and Peabody, because of the nature of their operations being so self-sufficient at this point as it is. And that would then expand from a 40% operation to a 90% production operation. Santa Barbara High School, of course, with those funding sources identified a few moments ago, would have been redesigned and restructured in order to take over with state-of-the-art equipment and production serving lines and processes. Carl, would you take a moment, please, to revisit this drawing that was originally put together by KBZ, pointing out a couple of highlights of what the kitchen would include? I can hold it for you.
Stand here so that the board members can see that.
And the TV.
Is that good for you?
Now, if I had my glasses on, I could see. Let's see. One of the big changes that we're looking at in this kitchen is adding what could be called a vocational kitchen, which would be in this area right here. Right above that is a new staff lounge, staff dining area. The old kitchen was in this configuration right here, with this being more of a prep and serving area. We would be putting in a new hood out here to allow for a second preparation cooking area. We've got new manager's office and director's office down in this area. Pot washing station over here. I think we have to flip this over now or open it up a little bit. The freezers and refrigerators that Dave was referring to were in this area, and they basically had to come out because of the mold and the dry rot and the fact that they were essentially disintegrating and falling apart. So we've got a new walk-in refrigerator right here, a new walk-in freezer right here. We have staff changing rooms over here. There were restrooms over here, but we are upgrading those restrooms to be accessible restrooms, and we're also adding an accessible restroom up here at this end of the building as well. The final component, Frank can probably address a little bit more thoroughly than I can, but it would include a food court component out here in this part of the multipurpose room.
Well, may I ask a question?
Of course.
That says all the food is cooked on Anapamu Street, right? And then it goes to all those other places, do I? Okay.
Transported to the other places.
How
yes.
many trucks you have to buy? How do you get it there? And presumably it all has to get there at lunchtime.
Correct. We don't anticipate having to purchase any additional vehicles. We have 3 vehicles now that are in use, and we should be able to accomplish this still with those 3 vehicles. We had 1 vehicle as a spare that we just sold. It was becoming too old and too hard to find parts to maintain. It was surplused and went away about a week ago. We had 1 delivery truck that was only used for half a day, so we increased that to a full-time day, and we go from 2.5 warehousemen driving trucks for food service to a total of 3. So we don't have to buy any more trucks. We just increase hours and become efficient.
Could I ask you to go back to the other part of that question? Is all the food across the district then coming out of the Santa Barbara kitchen, or is some
All of the hot entrees would come out of the Santa Barbara kitchen. A lot of the cold salad prep and things like that would still be done at the school site. I think Frank is a little bit better to address that than I would be.
About how many hot entrees a day is that?
We essentially run 2 operations. In the elementary school, there is a single entree with a salad bar. In the secondary district, they will run that same hot entree that they run in the elementary school, but in different portion sizes, as well as 4 additional hot entrees. This year, we have standardized the menus across the district. Every high school, every junior high school will be serving the same menu for a la carte and the salad bar on a daily basis. This makes it easier for control of inventory, for controlling quality, and making sure that every student gets essentially the same meal at each school site.
So how many hot entrees a day?
There will be in the elementary school, 1 in the...
Total. Out of that kitchen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Our par right now for reimbursable meals across the district is about 4,500 to 5,000 a day, hot entrees. Then we have the a la carte section, sorry, I misunderstood, and those are done by transactions, and those can be anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 transactions a day, but they're not necessarily full meals.
Thank you, that's what I want to know.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Also included in this report from the consultant were some other items that are of benefit to the district with the consolidated main kitchen. The quality of food would be consistent from school site to school site. Productivity of staff would be increased through training and close supervision. Increasing consolidating food preparation tasks. That when one employee is absent, it's much easier for there to be more employees at the main site to take over and assist in that absence rather than in situations where they're at a production kitchen with only 1 or 2 people available. Financial analysis of daily operations would be more easily accomplished with this central location. Food costs would decrease as product could be ordered in larger quantities. Delivery costs would decrease because at this point we have a lot of delivery going to several different sites. We could consolidate 100% of the food preparation, except with the exception of Peabody and OAS, as we discussed, as being continued separate. Utility costs would be likely reduced because the main preparation is at one site. And the cost of major maintenance and repair of equipment and facilities is limited to 1 production facility. And I think that is where your big savings are lying. Because again, once you start having main production kitchens all over this district and their freezers and large central food preparation equipment dying, and you open up those facilities, you're going to face yourself with a large remodeling program that has no funding source. One of the other things that'll have to be considered, and it's already been approached with the Classified School Employees Association, is looking at the organizational charts. This happens to be the organizational chart at this time, which is a really interesting dynamic when you put it in writing. We have 1 director of nutrition services over all cafeteria managers at 12 production kitchens, plus 3 or 4 main staff. And I show Peabody, OAS, and Dos Pueblos off to the side because they have responsibility to the board, but they are not directly, Dos Pueblos are not directly responding to the Director of Nutrition Services, although they're responsible to the board. So that's a pretty 1-layer organizational chart at this time with a lot of responsibility layered in 1 position. And the proposed nutrition services organization chart put together by the consulting firm of Vavrinic Trine Day takes and puts out the administrative house, the internal accounting, the accountability for where those funds are going, and the daily receipts and daily inventory into its own subsection with an assistant director, and then production kitchens having managers over elementary and secondary. Those kitchens that would be turned from main production kitchens to coming from Santa Barbara High School would be known as service kitchens. Would have a food service officer and then food service assistants and delivery drivers. This is a much more productive hierarchy and organizational chart, and apparently meets closer to industry standards for running production kitchens of the nature that we have. We did include in the report that our staff visited Santa Clarita and Paso Robles for their main production kitchens and got some good ideas on how those can operate efficiently. And these are charts that were developed by the consultant. So I wanted to make it very clear that after studying this for months and working very hard to get as much internal and accounting controls in place as possible, from my perspective and my years of experience in management and organizational environments, that we've come as far as we can come without making systemic change. The facilities are aging. They need major maintenance with no funds. Making this transition would take the next year. With your direction, we would give you the exact tasks and the exact budgets that need to be taken under consideration and approved by this board. And our staff is ready to move forward because they're all in agreement that this is the best situation for the school districts. It's imperative for fiscal solvency. The cafeteria fund cannot continue to encroach, and especially into the elementary district. You have no place to go. That reduces the major infrastructure cost potential that I told you about when all these other production kitchens start to fall into disrepair. There'd be standard quality meals, reduction in labor costs. I believe the report suggests that if we went into the situation with the main production kitchen and then the service kitchens, it could could save potentially $250,000 a year. $238,000, I think, is the number quoted, give or take, and depending on the outcome of negotiations, that's a significant amount of money. Reduction in delivery costs, and in this era of continued petroleum increase, that's significant. An efficient use of staff and equipment, and improved supervision and training. I don't see a downside. And I think it's really important that we've had this opportunity to bring to you on a number of occasions why we believe this to be a good thing, and have had it verified even further independently by the consultant firm. And I don't know if you have questions based on the report that was in the backup. I'd be glad to answer any of those questions.
How much?
You know, we brought a sample budget back in March, and the bidding environment being what it is, I think my next slide, in fact, speaks to that. Thank you, Bob. That August 22nd, I recommend that we bring you a budget and reveal the funding sources. And it is the three main sources I spoke to a moment ago. Measure V, which would have to go back to the Bond Oversight Committee. That kitchen has to be remodeled anyway. And the areas of that remodel that would not normally fall under Measure V and that particular project could be picked up by developer fees and deferred maintenance. We did bring a sample budget in March, but those numbers will definitely have changed now if we need to go back out.
I don't remember what the numbers were in March even.
I don't recall them, and I don't want to quote them all. Do you recall?
I don't recall those numbers, but I know in conversations with the architect, it's his opinion, without going into detailed drawings and detailed cost estimate, that to put the Santa Barbara kitchen back as just a Santa Barbara High School kitchen, as was originally planned as a Measure V project, could run upwards of double the original contract.
Which is?
Well, the original contract was $450,000. So upwards of double would be somewhere upwards towards $900,000.
Okay, and now the super kitchen will be more than that or less than that?
More than that. It'll be more than that.
Okay.
The super kitchen.
I'm trying to zero in on how much the super kitchen costs.
I don't have a number for that right now. If we get the direction, we'll go back to the architect, we'll crunch some hard numbers, have them go to a consulting firm that can give us those numbers. But you're talking, I would say we're talking excess of $1.5 million.
Thank you. I appreciate real numbers.
That's
even
just
though, even though they're
that's
very
it.
tentative.
I don't quote numbers, and that's a guess. I'm saying, but it, yeah, it's.
Well, I won't attribute that quote to you, Mr. Hedyon.
But again, we believe we can bring you a budget that will show three funding sources that are available: developer fees, deferred
Can I ask
maintenance,
one
and
more,
Measure V.
financial
Oh, yeah,
question?
sure, Bob.
When Mr. Lynn talks about the price per meal, is there any of this capital expense built into amortizing, or do those prices amortize the capital, or is that the capital? And since we're a public agency, we don't get a return on the capital.
You haven't built capital.
In this year's budget, we have $300,000 to take care of some of the equipment. And I'm planning on bringing that into the budget over the next 5 years. Whether I use that all or not depends upon whether the central kitchen concept passes. For example, I did a study. If we do not approve a central kitchen, equipment replacement alone, just equipment over the next 5 years, we'll have to spend about $900,000 to replace equipment. With the central kitchen, we will have to replace equipment to the tune of about $459,000. We'll save $500,000 in equipment by going to a central kitchen as opposed to not.
I didn't understand that, Mr. Ethiel.
No, he wanted to know, is the cost of our meals including capitalization? And when we set those meal fee increases, it did not include the cost of capitalization. Although, when we were trying to balance the budget using meal fee increases, there was $300,000 worth of capital equipment in that budget. But we did not include a specific amount on that meal fee increase that was towards capital.
Has there ever been a study of what it would cost to open this up for private sector bidding? Let the private sector put up the capital?
Well, sir, I'm somewhat naive in all the codes exactly, but when you're talking about a situation where primarily the staffing is classified, and you think that you'd like to look into doing something in a private sector nature, there's definite education codes that have to be complied with. And one of those includes, I believe, that the unit itself has to agree to letting out a contract for services that they've already been providing.
Yeah, but you're talking about a labor contract?
Yeah, I'm talking about, yes,
Those things are negotiable, right?
Well, the labor contract's negotiable, but letting out services to an outside firm for a large contract like providing food services has major steps have to go through with the unit.
The model that's in the back of my mind is much smaller, where it's opened up to smaller concerns, and where they can sell food on campus, complying with all health codes, presumably. They do it at UCSB.
I know. We have pretty specific ed codes that required for K-12s.
That's a non-starter? Or?
You know, I'm limited with my knowledge of that. Carolyn, do you know anything about classified contracting out of services that have been provided by unit members? Well, I think that you are able to use Marriott, right? Do you want to come up to this mic? I'll just give you personal experience before Carolyn moves up to the mic. At Lucia Mar School District, they moved their busing out to Santa Barbara Transportation and did not get formal votes from the union. It did not go through a whole host of ed code required steps, and were sued, and the PERB board held them up, and they're still finalizing lawsuits from every single bus driver that was let go. So you have to be very, very careful contracting out services that have been previously provided by classified unit members.
I don't necessarily have too much more to add to that. I mean, I do know that Marriott, as an example, they're now known as, you probably know it's a different corporate name, does do that service. They do a variety of services, from the management and using your classified personnel to using all of their own staff. So, but what Mary said is valid, because you could get in a lawsuit over it. It's very possible. I mean, anything's possible in that regard.
I hate to use a real company's name, but what if Super Rica sold on campus? I'm not talking big, I'm talking about diversity. I went through this at UCSB. I was on a committee, 30 years ago that dealt with this, and at the time nobody would hear of such things. Now you walk on campus, you've got little places to eat all over. Is that because they don't have a union, or I don't quite see why a union contract, which presumably could be negotiated in a way that is acceptable to everybody, would be the deal killer on this. The question is, this is the kind of thing, it seems to me, that without being a capitalist freak, one can say that history seems to suggest that markets solve these problems better than bureaucracies. And that's the hypothesis that I wonder if it's been investigated.
But we have a situation is we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, because everything has been tried before. Number one, we are bound by the regulations of the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program provides the money for the reimbursements. Those regulations are pretty standard. Nothing.
That is a direct answer to my question. I really appreciate that.
Nothing can be sold on campus by any outside concern that is in direct conflict with what is served through the National School Lunch Program in the cafeterias. That limits us a good deal, number one. And then there are a whole bunch of other considerations after that, but that's the primary consideration.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Can I ask some questions? Are you done, Dr. Noel? I can see. Are you done? Oh, okay. Can I ask some questions? First of all, the service kitchens are going, that's what you're calling them, the elementaries, the ones that will be preparing the salads and so forth, still need refrigerators, and so, and I would imagine almost the same number of things, maybe just not the stoves. And maybe not the freezer, but they still need almost everything else. Is that?
Not really. The requirements for a service kitchen are very different than the requirements for a full production kitchen. I have had some conversations with the Environmental Health Department simply because we have a number of kitchens that have outstanding dings, if you will, on their previous environmental health reports, in which they state, we understand that these are problems and you really have to fix them, but we're not going to make you fix them until you do something else in the kitchen. As soon as you have to do some sort of repair in the kitchen, then you must do all these other things that we've been dinging you on for the last 10 years. So to give you the best example that I have, let's take the Dos Pueblos kitchen. I used this example in a staff meeting this morning with our kitchen managers. There is a panel in the freezer that is loose. We can live with that for now. That panel comes down, I have to replace that freezer. The minute I replace that freezer, the Public Health Department comes in, has to approve that, and I have been told by the Public Health Department that there is a very good chance, which means they're going to take a look at the past inspection reports and require us to make all of the changes and the fixes that we need to do that we don't have to do right now. And those are the kinds of things that are happening at the Santa Barbara High School right now. So, and there's no fund for that. Now, if we go to a centralized kitchen, that becomes a service kitchen, and that freezer goes down. I shut down the freezer, I clean it, I seal it, I buy one, maybe two $4,000 three-compartment refrigerators. That's all they need. They transfer their work to the outside area. We don't have the same thing that we need in the cafeteria. I don't have to spend that money. The same thing over at two other schools that are going to be requiring the Santa Barbara Junior High with that freezer. If we go to a centralized kitchen, I don't have to replace that freezer. I don't have to, and if I have to replace that freezer, then I have to do all the floors, the ceilings, the same thing that's happening at Santa Barbara High School. We're trying to avoid all of those interior costs by doing that. And we're talking, in my opinion, we're talking millions of dollars.
Do we have
can avoid.
Do we have any kitchens that are in particularly good shape?
To varying degrees, some of them are in better shape than others. Over a 5 and even 10-year period, they're all going to need major work, sooner or later. For an example, when I first came here, Harding School had been, my predecessor had set out a contract to do Harding School to put in a walk-in refrigerator and to bring it up to ADA code. That went out for a bid for $269,000, I believe. I put that bid out again 2 years later because the possibility existed we had to look at that. 2 years later, that bid came back at $469,000. If we go ahead and do that 2 more years from then, we're talking $600,000, $700,000, and that's just for Harding. So we got $700,000 possibly for Harding. I don't know what it'll be for the other 3 schools, and this is going to go on and on and on until we solve the problem in each individual kitchen. We have equipment in that kitchen that were purchased in 1966. We've got to change it.
Can I ask about DP, that there was a dotted line there?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
At this time, it's not directly under the direction of the Nutrition Services Director. It's under the direction of the superintendent and the principal at Dos Pueblos.
Because we have 2 programs at Dos Pueblos, we have the ROP and the kitchen. The principal at Dos Pueblos is doing the daily supervision for that program. rather than us and ROP and DP all trying to three manage the same area with different programs. It was decided last year that we would let the principal at that site oversee the supervision for both those programs. And as we know, that principal reports to the superintendent, not to Frank.
So what will that mean in terms of the central kitchen?
It actually not anything in particular. It was just to show an organizational chart of current reporting
No,
and
it
then
was,
compare it.
It was actually the chart with all the circles.
We would still prepare food and deliver to them, just like all the other kitchens.
Yeah, they'd still be
It's the
part of the
on-site-
service kitchens.
It's the on-site kitchen staff that is supervised by the principal.
No, it's this chart where the dust
it's still
bubble
a
has-
service kitchen, but it's still also shown an authority line too. But it's a service kitchen.
So it would be exactly the same.
Yeah, it'd be exactly the same as a service kitchen, getting all its main entrees from Santa Barbara High School main kitchen.
We talked last time, the question was whether the food would be in trays, and I guess it sounds like, although the report made it sound sort of not too sure, but the food would come in trays and then go to the site, and they would individually, would they cook it at the site then?
All of the food is prepared and cooked to the proper temperature according to the regulations at the central kitchen. It is then placed in transport carts and satellite in carts and transported to the schools where it is served. It is served in, it's brought in bulk, it's put in the containers as necessary, depending upon each individual kitchen, brought in and then served in the normal fashion, the regular fashion.
So it has to be, then it's taken out of these things and
Correct.
put it, and
Correct.
somehow these things have to go back.
Well, they go into the service lines, which are all heated. The service lines are out in the cafeteria. They're not in the kitchen. There is no production kitchen. Everything is brought in heated carts that maintain the temperature to the legal limit, and they're taken from those hot carts and put into service.
So there is no making into, I want to make that clear, that it's not going to make it into a individual service so that you have to then transport individual servings.
It will be that to some extent for the a la carte service in the secondary schools, but not in the elementary schools, no. Because of the nature of the service for the high school, it's done that way on the sites. So we continue to serve it in the same fashion, but it will be done and then transported.
And does that require additional materials of some sort?
No, it just transfers the materials from the service kit, from the what were the production kitchens to the central kitchens. We're not going to change the volume of what we do in terms of of what we need for materials. It's just going to be all put in one place instead of 12 places.
And as we discussed earlier, we were already doing this same process with these 7 entities from the one main production kitchen. And I also wanted to note, and I think it was in our presentation, that this year that kitchen was not in production. It was all moved to Santa Barbara Junior High School, and we still reduced the declining amount of revenue, even with one kitchen completely down and in construction. So hats off to the people in food services who worked so hard this year. But as you can see, we're already doing that similar process. We're just going to expand it to make the production and the transport to be the including all the other kitchens. I'm not good at this. And this evening, you ate a meal from a cart that was transported in, and I hope you enjoyed it. And you need to give a note to the fact that that meal was served an hour longer than it normally would have been, an hour later, because you were in a closed-door session situation, but it normally would have served an hour fresher. So we wanted you to have that visual sensation and that knowledge of what it would be like as far as moving food for the kitchens through the transport. But we're doing it now. We're just wanting to expand it to save the infrastructure from imploding upon itself, because that is the direction it's going, and you have no funds to take over repairing kitchens that have to be completely remodeled. Can you move this forward to me to the very last slide, because I want to get the timeline down and sort of wrap this up for the board, unless they have more questions.
Excuse me, I just
Yes, of
realized we
course.
went over 10:30. I was supposed to do something at 10:30.
Oh, I apologize.
I'm supposed to say we're going on beyond 10:30.
And it's an indulgence for me, being at my last opportunity to speak to this board. The recommendation from the consultant has been received in the report, and I just did a synopsis for you of what that recommendation is. Staff recommends that board directs staff to implement. And what that means is it starts the process of bringing to you a funding source budget for the Santa Barbara High School kitchen and a task analysis of what would need to take place. Carl Mayros just handed to me a quick analysis of funding, by the way. 30% could come from developer fees, 40% would come from deferred maintenance, 30% would come from Measure V funds. That we bring that budget to you that you could then consider and approve for the project. August 2006, CSEA negotiations would continue re-propose staffing changes because that's required. And in fact, we've already begun discussing all this with them. The Bond Oversight Committee would also be given an update on what that kitchen budget looks like regardless of how it goes because it has to be remodeled. And their actuarial or architectural kitchen design drawings that need to be completed in a bid process beginning for remodel. An expanded main production kitchen could open for the next school year. And
Mary,
excuse me.
That would be a 2008 August main production kitchen opening. It'd be close to a 2-year process by the time we draw the plans, go out to bid, and do the construction.
Oh, I apologize. I thought it was a 1-year process. Okay, I apologize. Mr. Hetyak was not here when I drew this timeline up, and he would have known much better than I. The goal being to try and mitigate the potential infrastructure costs that you're going to be facing when you continue with 13 production kitchens with no funding source. So at this time, I wanted to ask the board if they would consider directing the staff to develop the budget and develop the tasks necessary to implement a main production kitchen expansion at Santa Barbara High School.
I have one quick question. How is this being perceived by the site staff? Is there understanding about what's going on, and are they fairly supportive, or is there a lot of resistance?
We've had several meetings with Paul Turnbull, of course. The first meeting and the first conversation, they were dead set against it, basically because they're looking at losing a little bit of kitchen space, losing some parking, and then Paul said, well, what's in it for the school? And that's when we put our heads together and came up with the idea of the vocational education kitchen, having a program there that would increase Santa Barbara High School by 1 classroom, another teaching station, and having the opportunity then to collaborate with community college and possibly have a dual enrollment type situation in addition to some classes at Santa Barbara High School in culinary arts for vocational culinary arts. So what the school gets out of it is another teaching station and the ability to have vocational culinary arts and a dual enrollment class, hopefully, with community college. And so Paul Turnbull and the staff have understood the situation that the district is in as far as financially and what we're trying to accomplish. And at this point in time, with them getting the extra teaching space and the remodel, I don't think there's any opposition.
What about the other sites that will be affected just by changing their operations? Has that been?
I don't know if you wish to speak to that, Frank. On page 1, it lists the cafeteria task force, which we have been meeting with for well over a year. It includes some of the top managers that we have across our kitchens. And Frank just recently had trainings and has been standardizing menus. Plus, there's been discussions with CSEA on the potential that this was going to be taking place. I don't know if you have any comments about how they're feeling. I believe that they feel like they're being well informed, and we are trying to keep them abreast of everything going on.
Yeah, the members from Nutrition Services that are on the board are 4 of our cafeteria managers. There is, of course, going to be ambivalence amongst the nutrition staff as to how this is going to work. Change is difficult. There's been ambivalence since I started because all I've done since I've come on is introduce change into the way we do business in the district. They do understand. Mr. Hetyak was at our meeting today to explain what was happening this evening, where we were going, what we were planning. I do believe they have a clear understanding of the necessity, from our perspective, of doing this particular project, simply because doing business the way we have been for the last 20 or 30 years is simply not going to work. It's just, we just can't sustain the rising costs with 12, 13 production kitchens and 70 staff in nutrition services and the other expenses that are involved with the infrastructure, which is by far the scariest proposition, those infrastructure costs.
So again, I'd like to ask the board to give direction to staff to go ahead and work towards implementing the main production kitchen at Santa Barbara High School and to bring back to you a budget and a task timeline and all the detail of how this would go forward on August 22nd for your approval.
Do I hear a motion?
Do you need a motion or just general?
This is
head
on
nodding?
conference agenda. What I need is board direction. I mean, we've come a long way and studied this for months and months and brought information back, and it is the consensus of the consultant and the staff that this is the best fiduciary presentation that we can make to you in order to maintain the solvency of the cafeteria and the general funds and to mitigate and avoid future very large infrastructure costs.
I'd like to hear from the board as a direction to bring back a tentative budget, any tentative timeline going along those lines.
We seem to be
Not necessarily a
hesitating.
motion.
We seem to be hesitating. I have some reservations, but I guess we seem to have to do this. Is not my first choice of things to do. I kind of like the smell of a school with the food cooking and brings back fond memories. It's not my first choice, but I guess so. Seems like something we have to do.
Well, I would say bring it back. We're not approving this final action. At
Right,
this
you're not
point, we're
approving
getting
final action.
Further information at the next
You're giving
meeting.
us direction to proceed and prepare what you need to see and approve in the way of a budget and task timeline.
If you need a motion to that effect, I'll move that you do that. Otherwise, I think just general agreement that that's what we'd like you to do.
I'm not in agreement. Don't look this way. I cannot get over something very fundamental. You got sort of over 5,000 meals a day, free rent, no amortization of capital, and it goes into debt, or it runs in the red, $1 million. Something is fundamentally wrong.
Sir, it ran into debt $1 million from 1993-94 to 2004, if I
now
remember
we're looking
correctly.
for a $1.5 million bailout. Okay. And then I have
Sir,
to say,
no,
and
we're not
I
looking
have
for-
to say that we're talking about Measure V funds. It does remind me that Santa Barbara High School spent about $2 million on a nice swimming pool and $600,000 on a faculty parking lot while this was going on. Where's the management? Something's wrong here.
Not having been here at that time, sir, as I reminded you, we took it under, as soon as we recognized what was going on, we made major accounting and internal control changes that have brought it down to the fact that we only have potentially an upside down situation of $170,000 this year, which is a major accomplishment. And I'm trying to recommend to this board that this entire cafeteria situation is going to implode on you with the 12 production kitchens that are aging, and you will not have the funds to replace the old freezers and the old equipment or to feed the children appropriately. At some point, it may be those kitchens cannot be fixed, and you will end up with one central kitchen doing it anyway, by gosh or by golly. It's much better to take advantage of a unique opportunity with funding source to do it right.
I would say at this point we don't have too many options. So, I mean, we're in this predicament, and however we got into this predicament, we're not going to solve that problem by not taking action. So.
Well, there's efficiency and economies of scales here that we believe are really going to benefit the districts. The elementary district's economic challenges cannot bear continued insolvency of your other funds.
I understand, Mrs. Rodriguez, that we're in the position. I guess what I'm saying is that a situation that has gone on this long and created this kind of a problem suggests to me that there's been a dearth of thinking, of imagination, and thinking outside of the box. And I don't hear anything out of the box here. I hear more box, more bureaucracy, a giant kitchen, more staff.
No, sir, I'm actually recommending that the labor costs would be reduced. And there would be efficiency with the labor that we have because they wouldn't be disseminated between 13 different production kitchens. They would be all in one kitchen where they were trained and uniformly and provide standard quality food.
I won't comment on the standard quality food.
Well, sir, I understand that, but it follows nutritional guidelines of the National School Lunch Program and the Wellness Committee and other requirements. If we could just get consensus direction so that tasks can be taken by the district staff to bring back to you.
Well, you have two that say that go ahead and do
All
the
right.
first.
Thank you very much for your time and patience with us.
Madam President, Madam Vice President, I would like to call for a vote on this.
Oh, okay, that's
This
fine.
is, this is,
We don't have
we're talking
a
about
quorum.
We're talking about a consensus. That's something that public agencies, public legislative bodies have to do by formal voting.
Well, this is not on as an action item. This is on for direction from the board under conference.
Well, then let's bring it back as an
We'll bring
action
it back
item
to you on
and
the
vote.
22nd. So we're taking direction to go ahead and produce a budget and a task list for the board to consider on an action item and approve at the
Well,
22nd.
You're taking the direction, and there is no consensus on this board. There may be two people, but there is strong dissensus on the part of one. So if you're taking direction, you are drawing a conclusion.
So
about
we should put
something
it
that
on
this
the,
board has
on,
done.
so we should put it
We'll
on the,
simply bring it back
yeah,
as
we'll
an
put it on the
action
action
item
item next time.
and see
Please do.
what the
Yeah.
board's pleasure
Yes,
is.
of course.
Okay.
And also, two members are not here who may have other opinions.
All right, thank you for that opportunity to cover this item so late in the evening.
Thank you, Mrs.
You're welcome.
We move on. We are up to the last item on here, D26, acceptance of, no, I'm sorry. Where are we?
F5?
F5. Report on potential budget additions or reductions to the elementary district budget.
Did you receive these two copies? They're attachments F5 up front. I meant to put them up here for you. If not, they're over on the side table. Let me grab them for you to make sure you have them. In addition to what's in your backup in the binder. I'll just put them up on the overhead. You can be able to put this up on the overhead for me. I need you to turn it back on.
Is there another item
No, it's two, but they're all gone, so I'm just going to put it on the overhead for you.
Oh, I see.
I don't know how they got taken, but they did. Yeah, because I had this other agenda. Just copies of this one, I guess. This is your backup for the district sites and how much they cost. While we're waiting for the overhead to come back up. Why not? Okay, well, go ahead and take your 5 minutes, and I'll start walking through this with them. Since April of 2006, I presented to the board in various conference and action items for the budgets, the projected status of the elementary district budget. And I noted that the budget reflected rebuilding reserves from the 1.5% ending balance that we had in 0405 up to 3%. We were actually at just under 3% when we brought the final budget to the board. The board gave direction to rebuild that to a full 3% in the elementary district budget and then approve that level as final. And I've held an ongoing discussion with the board and asked for direction related to projection and final budgets and told them that it did not include the following, in the elementary in particular in this case: collective bargaining agreement costs for fiscal year 06-07, any trust set aside for retiree benefits liability, or any future special fund solvency or settlement costs. So the board was asked for and gave direction that we needed to rebuild the ending balance of the elementary district and the high school district, but this is dealing with the elementary district, by an additional 2%, so that there would be something in the budget for the board to consider for future decisions related to those items and whatever else might come to this board. And a 2% reserve, if you look at that, the cover memo that you had in your packet, it says a 20% reserve. That's a misprint. It should say a 2% reserve. Would require additional available funds of $828,000. I know, wouldn't that be nice? That's Carmel and other points along the coast. A 2% reserve would require additional available funds of $828,000. I've attached a list of reflecting programs and or service costs that are provided within the elementary district to begin the discussion. And these are programs or service costs that do not have a specific funding source or are net of a funding source. So for instance, in your packet backup that you had, and we'll put it up as soon as this system comes up, the elementary music program, after the contribution made by the Public Education Foundation, cost the general unrestricted funds of the elementary district $192,000. And I'm reflecting programs here that are not either related to K-6 general education or required by contract or are related to facility costs. So it's $192,000 that comes out of unrestricted general funds for that program. $339,000 is the cost of health assistance at 10 sites, 10 elementary sites. $238,000 is the cost of library media services. $205,000 is what the elementary site has been paying to the high school districts, or the elementary has been paying to the high school districts for the rent of 2 sites. Nurses and supplies coming out of unrestricted general fund is $116,000. I wouldn't normally read this to you, but since we don't have the technical support. Psychologists and supplies, $56,000. If you look at grade 4-6 teacher class size, which I believe is in contract at this point at 27:1, if you raised it to 28:1, and that would have to be negotiated, that would be a source of approximately $225,000 ongoing per year available. If you raised it to 29:1, it'd be a source of $450,000 a year available. Principal staffing ratio at 80% to average daily attendance might save approximately $24,000. I mean, we were looking in various areas, and staffing ratios and things that are not funded. And note that 5% of district admin supplies and services would yield approximately $49,000. That's a total of $1,000,008, although that's somewhat of a redundant total because it shows the 28:1 and the 29:1 added together when actually it'd be one or the other if that were so negotiated. I come to you to discuss this today because the elementary district barely made the 3%. And there's no funds in there for collective bargaining. And if the district wants us to look at if the district board wanted us to look at some ideas of potential budget reductions, because there are no additions that are unrestricted general fund, except that Bob Wolf is going to do an 06-07 budget update, so he didn't have an opportunity to do that for you this evening. But there might potentially be some funds coming in from some art programs or other one-time funds or ongoing funds that might mitigate or ameliorate some of these funds. But the reality is, when you're looking for $848,000, these are the first areas that can be looked at. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about in this area was and how dire the elementary district finds itself with no funds to discuss the collective bargaining. Another area to look at is the fixed ongoing costs of operating 10 elementary sites. And if you can dial this down a little bit or make it a little easier to read. Just for discussion purposes, this is out of the fiscal year 06-07 budget. The Adams, and this is a draft, Adams school site operation in the 06-07 budget is $443,000. Cleveland is $343,000. This does not include teaching staff because the assumption would be that the teaching staff would move or the children would move. And let me touch the third rail again. This is if these sites were not in operation, what might the potential savings be every year? And when you're looking at in the elementary, and we've just seen the facilities master plan, and I believe some numbers reflected that some schools are at 2/3 capacity. What would each of the sites potentially save annually if they were not in fact operated? So Franklin is running $582,000 now. That does include the cost of Cesar Chavez utilities because they don't have separate meters. Could you slip that up for me, please? Harding is $436,000 in the budget to operate. OES was at $162,000, although their utilities are not shown because those are not separately metered from La Colina. Washington, $470,000 a year to operate. Santa Barbara Community Academy, $328,000. Roosevelt, $422,000. Monroe, $369,000. This is utilities, administrators, and classified staff. If you can move it back down for me. because we only have one more left here. McKinley, $454,000. I just wanted to touch that third rail and give you an idea of what each of the plants cost to operate, because these are the continuing economic challenges you face. And it is my responsibility, having no hidden agenda at all, and having always been very honest and open with this board as much as possible about what you face financially. MAW saved us in the elementary district last year, and that's the Medical Administrative Activity Funds. Saved us for being qualified, potentially, at least conditional at the County Office of Education. Helped us to make it to a 3%. But there's no funds for the three items I just told you about a moment ago. These are your ongoing economic challenges for this district. Continued declining enrollment, which is annual compounded loss of revenue. If you lose 100 students a year times approximately $5,000 per, that's $500,000. You're at least $5 million a year less than you would have been 6 years ago with the kinds of drops that you've had in enrollment. Fixed increasing operating costs of elementary sites. Building capacities are declining. You're using funds that would be available for remaining students for programs to operate these sites, and increasing the cost of maintaining aging facilities with no funding. And we just talked about that when it comes to the cafeterias. Class size ratio of 4 to 6 grades, 4 through 6 grades is in contract. That is also an economic challenge for us as we continue to face declining enrollment across the grades. The increasing costs of special education, transportation, and the unfunded liability for retiree benefits is a continued hit on the elementary district, and encroaching costs of other fund solvency. As I prepare to leave this district, and I really appreciate the excellent opportunities I've had, and I said this a little earlier, to exercise every area of education I've had and every bit of experience I've had in 20 plus years of schools, I recommend that this board seek proposals from a private outside firm such as School Services or Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team to look at solvency proposals and recommendations for the elementary district. And I don't think that it would be a good idea to leave any stone unturned. That means looking at potential of site closures, what that would mean, what that would bring in for you, looking at what are you going to do in the way of encroachments of special education. I mean, a really strong look at the solvencies of the elementary district, and I think it would very much help to start that dialogue with an outside study. Meanwhile, going back to this list of budgeted expenditures, this is for discussion purposes at this time. If you want to build 2%, back into the budget, these are items to consider. You can also task us to go back and look into other areas. I just walked through very quickly with you the cost to operate sites. The staffing is already in place for certificated staffing, so there really isn't much reduction you can do there, although as soon as these sites, this year so far, and please quote me if I'm wrong, Robin, the 2 year-round schools opened down. Cleveland is down, Santa Barbara Community Academy is down. Not as far as we thought. Santa Barbara Community is now up, thank you. But Cleveland is definitely down, and I believe we're down 1 teacher. So as the doors open on the rest of the sites, we're going to watch that very closely beginning in August to see where we need to go.
Do we have a running tally of how much excess capacity there is?
You know, that was in the facilities master plan, and I don't know if they felt confident that those were final numbers or if those tied out to just classroom site use or if that was the entire building, or do you recall? He doesn't recall.
I did some counts with the public using public data. I guess it's a year ago since I made a presentation to the board, and it was like pushing 400 students total, which was about the equivalent of a school. And I wanted to comment on that because it's kind of become a taboo of the subculture around here to talk about the so-called third rail, i.e. closing a school. It's incorrect.
It's not the first time we've talked about it.
No, I understand. And every time we do, we blush like it's we avoid it because it's too delicate. And this is my point, that the issue is in very large part political, not economic. It's not in part, sure, there are lots of financial problems, but they're political problems. If the board hasn't got what it takes to close a school, if that's what's required, that's not an economic problem, it's a political failure. And I think everyone should understand that.
Well, I absolutely understand that, sir, and I've been in areas where they've had to, in fact, take that terrible step because the community suffers. But in the long run, the responsibility is an economic fiduciary one, and the cost of running those plants is the same and in climbing with the cost of natural gas and the cost of anything petroleum-based going up. We're not shutting down whole wings and not operating them. So the reality is you can't continue to run plant operations that took care of maybe another 1,000 students 6 years ago and continue to have any kind of ultimate net ending balance that's in the positive situation. I also wanted to make one other comment when some presentations have been made in the past that you have to separate the fact that we have 6,000 plus students in our elementary district and it doesn't seem to have changed much, and I think that was part of the presentation of Ms. Saley when she did facilities master plan. That's true across the board with the 3 charters, but the 3 charters have grown and the revenue limit sites, the 10 revenue limit sites have just done this. So that is where I believe the board really needs to take a hard look, a solvency study done by an outside firm that could give you some real thoughts and ideas of what to do for the elementary district, more for a long term, for a short term, if you want direct staff to bring forward some other ideas in addition to these. We're looking for that 2% reserve so you have something to work with.
I have a comment about the school site costs, because it seems like we don't ever really get to the place of if we were to reduce our energy and utility costs. We're starting to touch this a little bit more directly in the recycling committee for the district, where we excuse me, we can reduce our costs by not just reducing the waste and recycling it, but also reducing the number of cans that we are using during the off-peak times. We have an environmental initiative that we've adopted this year that doesn't really have targeted reduction associated with it, in other words, percentage goals. I think if we even just set a goal of 10% reduction in our various utility uses, including our waste, we'd have huge savings. I don't see that. We kind of talk about it, but I haven't actually seen a dollar amount put to it, so I'd like to add that.
Well, sure, absolutely. We
list.
can look at multi-pronged strategies like reducing utility costs and what can be accomplished along that line. I'm bringing you to the point where I think that major changes need to be made in the ongoing fixed costs for the elementary district. And I want to use as an example the basic aid district of San Luis Coastal, which 4 years ago closed 3 school sites. And their basic aid district, they saved $800,000+ a year. This is documented in the paper not long ago. $800,000 a year of ongoing costs plus $800,000 in revenues from the fact that they've turned around and leased and rented out those facilities. And yes, there was, I don't take it lightly that the community grieves at all. I think that in a best case scenario with a district with plenty of reserves, you should maintain your community neighborhood sites, and but you should really look hard at it when you've gotten to the point where you can barely make the minimum reserves.
I want to say, Ms. Stark, certainly we've had our differences, that I really appreciate what you have done for us. And I think tonight was just a magnificent example of you speaking with candor, leaving us with a sober farewell speech, and essentially setting an agenda for us. And I appreciate that very much.
Well, it's not hard to get Santa Barbara into your heart and to really care about what happens to the children and what they have available to them in way of programs and the best quality staff. It's not hard to say some of these things that need to be said. Thank you very much for everything you've done for me and Superintendent Sarvis in particular and all his support, and thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. Now is our opportunity to go back to the beginning of our agenda and pick up some of these consent agenda items. The first one that was pulled was D9.
Okay, bear with me because I can't find my, I just, it was a question that I probably would have to have someone from Cesar Chavez here to answer about the addition of 3 new languages on this proposal. Can you explain it at all?
You know,
I mean,
actually,
they do Spanish and English.
right.
And in fact, there was a recent article in the paper that sort of criticized them for focusing mostly on language and not doing such a great job on the academic side. Now, this proposal is to add German, French, and Portuguese? German, French, or Portuguese?
Or the way I understand it, and I haven't had a lot of conversation with the school on this, it's a renewal of the grant that they have right now that supports their dual immersion, and they believe that adding another option of an additional third language for the students is going to add to their experience, and it goes along with the kind of the culture of the school and what they believe in.
So that's an or, not an and. I mean, I'm just
Well,
reading it here.
they would both be, you know, they're either, when they come in, typically the students either speak English or Spanish, but they could potentially have other students coming in with other languages. But the part about that is the child would select, for most students, they're learning English and Spanish dual immersion. They would be able to select a third language to begin studying in.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Can we just go on and we'll come back and pick these up at the end and vote on them? Does that make sense? So next one is D11.
That was me also. I just was remarked here that $132,442 seemed like a lot of money for an assistant principal.
It was a
That was the correction.
Oh, that's not correct.
That-
underneath over here.
That was based on the previous salary. That
Oh,
was
okay,
incorrect, and
okay.
you have a
What is-
correction
What
sheet.
is the number now?
It's right under that piece of paper.
Okay.
118,749.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else on D11?
Wait a minute. Got a lot of blue ink on it. Okay, I understand one of them, but just from tonight's meeting, I got an answer to one. There are some funding sources that aren't mentioned here. The breakthrough training, $12,000. That's on the 3rd page of the personnel part. Down below it has musical theater performance teacher, 20,000, and it says site. Is that like ZIP funds or?
That's on D11?
Uh-huh. The
Personnel.
personnel,
What category is it?
consultants.
Consultants, okay.
The breakthrough coaching will be coming from categorical funds.
Which categorical funds?
Title II.
Title II, okay.
Yes.
And breakthrough coaching is to train administrators or teachers or both?
Breakthrough coaching is to train administrators and their secretaries. The purpose is to get administrators into the classrooms more.
Okay.
By
So
understanding.
that's
their-
how it's Title II, because it gets them into the classroom?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I know that that's what you had in mind. Musical theater performance, this is employment agreements, 20,000. What's this? It says site, the source on that is? Also, that's a terrific choice of a person.
Yeah, he is good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, good for Washington. Conrad Kono is something terrific, and kids love him. And the gate coordinator, the next one down, elementary SIP. Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's all I had on
Oh.
D11. Thank you.
Well, I just want to add that we have retirements. No, maybe some people are watching TV, but anyways, we have 2 retirements. Karen Schroeder, Washington Elementary, was there for 19 years. And Susan Weber, secretary at DP, retired after 22 plus years. Now we move on to D13.
D13?
D13.
Did I pull that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I did pull that. I pulled that mostly because it just seemed like such a meager raise. I mean, when you calculate it as a percentage, yes, it's 3 or 4%, but $1 an hour? Can't we afford to give them a little better raise than that?
No.
But
It is
me
a
over
meager
here who
raise.
gets on your case all the time about spending too much, I want to spend more money. Come on. But that's from $29.27 an hour to $30.44 an hour is almost an insult, in my opinion. Well, that's going over really big. Isn't it? Well, I tried, you subs, I tried.
All right, D16.
Who is that?
Software.
Oh, yeah, I always pull this every year because it just kills me to spend so much money, and I always get the same answer, that it's an indispensable expenditure. Has anything changed, Ms. Stark?
Now, this operates our entire budget development system, payroll system, personnel system, all the financial components of software. And we've been a part of this major consortium for years. It comes out of San Bernardino, and all the software upgrades for everything from new tax tables to any kind of accounting changes like, oh, it's amazing. So
Okay.
I think actually it's fairly affordable.
I will remain silent on that issue until next year.
Thank you, and I won't be here to hear you be silent, but I'll take your word at it.
T21.
Okay, I asked for that one to be pulled. Mr. Hancock, I was confused by, it says, I'm not comfortable bringing forth a proposal from the state for approval.
They're not giving us enough money.
So what are we acting on? We're denying it?
No, we're giving them a right of entry. What we're telling the state is, even though...
Microphone.
Yeah, someone turned it off, I'm sorry.
It goes off automatically at 11:30.
That's good. If you recall, we just did a right-of-way agreement with McKinley for $10,000. The site at Monroe has a different zoning, has a different scope of work. It's taking more property. We have to replace a fence. They're taking out some trees, and I don't think they've offered us enough money. I've not yet. I offered them reasons why. I didn't offer them a dollar amount. I offered them reasons why, and they came back and said, well, we'll give you $5,000 more because of your reasons. And with the right-of-way agent I've been discussing this with in San Luis Obispo, I told him that I needed a little more time to do my research to come back with an accurate proposal. In the meantime, they want to get the project certified. So they says, will you give us a right of entry permit, which means that you'll allow us to do the work even though we haven't agreed on a dollar amount, and if so, we'll end up in either arbitration or condemnation if we don't come to an agreement. But I said, yes, it's ADA access. It's required by the state that they're going to have to do, so we know it's a requirement. I would ask the board to give you a right of entry, so that way you'll be able to certify the work. They're not ready to do the work yet. Their engineers have not we pointed out to them that their engineers have not properly designed or redesigned any of the drainage along Cliff Drive, along that school where there's a drainage channel right now, in their proposed plans to widen that area and put in handicap sidewalks and ramps. So while they're a ways from doing the work, they do want to get the project certified with the state. And so I'm recommending that we give them a right of entry permit so they can get it certified. In the meantime, hopefully we'll be able to reach an agreement that I can bring to the board, or the board can give me direction. I can come to the board ahead of time and say, this is what I plan on offering them, and you can give me direction on yes, no, and those things. I've also got, also soliciting opinions of some other people, including Sarah Griffin, who is an appraiser, and we've had a few email correspondences back and forth on what is a proper value for this strip of property. So I'm basically doing my homework to try and get the district as much money as possible for giving up the easement.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. I move to approve items D9, D11, D13, D16, and D21.
Do I hear a second? Can I second? Can I? I cannot. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The vote is 3-0. I think that ends our meeting. Oh, I guess I have to go to the last part, don't I? I'm not used to this. Coming events. Do we have anything coming events?
None other than
What
the
we've
ones I
talked about.
reported on.
Board comments. Do we have any board comments tonight? Future agenda items. And then I get to adjourn the meeting.